The point is that it's a trap in order to get people to focus on the Jewish population as opposed to the political ideology of the Zionism. And there's a lot of Jewish people in the world that are calling this out. Dan Cohen, for example, is an excellent journalist. He's a Jewish person himself who's been really going after this. But the point is that there are Orthodox Jewish communities that protest in Israel, that protest in UK, that protest in the United States, who are saying openly that we are Orthodox Jews and Zionism does not represent us. They get beat up by the IDF in Israel every weekend. So you can't just pretend that one is the only thing. But so the bigger picture is about trying to use this to manipulate people into missing the larger reality of what's actually happening. And that is infiltration, that is occupation, that is subversion. And the problem is that it's everywhere. This is not unique to the United States. This is not unique to, I don't, honestly, if you stand back and look at the bigger picture, if you stand back and look at, Bosnia, Rwanda, South Africa, every single one of these provably, unquestionably included the Zionist organization. And we're talking in South Africa, we're talking about apartheid, which is what Israel currently is, ethnic bioweapons, these are all on the record. Bosnia, a genocide, Rwanda, a genocide, both of which they were involved with the group, they armed the groups, they promoted the hatred. It's all on the record. And it's like, when I first looked into that, I'm going, like, and I always say this, I hate the word anniversary for this, I don't know what else to use, but the anniversary of Rwanda, I looked into that, interested, and I've heard the stories about this, I never really went too deep into it, and it was like the most obvious thing in the world. You barely crack the story open and you're going, yeah, right on the surface of the story. You can see the Zionist entity that's trying to manipulate this. They're saying, oh yeah, what you're dealing with is like us and the Palestinians. It's all documented. And then gave them Uzis and different, the bottom line is you can prove that they were involved with that. And you can see them committing a genocide today in multiple places, in Syria and Lebanon. And in no way, shape, or form does that represent every Israeli or every Jew in the world. That's the lie. That's the game. There's Israelis and Jewish people at large rising up and calling this out as a genocide. You can prove for left, right, just our government, that's, it's all it really is. There's no partisan binary game. It's really just one government is completely infiltrated by a foreign power. It's unnerving, and it's like, I try very hard not to be alarmist in what we do, but this is alarming. It is a very hard time to live in. But at the same time, I feel like I've never been more hopeful for where people's minds are at. People are listening, they're interested. And that scares a lot of people, I think. A lot of people in powerful positions that need you to be in line with a certain construct, like the two-party illusion, for example. They don't care what answers you find if they've got you asking the wrong questions. In the two-party illusion, the false binary, you're never going to change anything if we can't see past that.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Friday, June 13th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. That was the excellent work, part of the documentary released by T. Snyder. Synergy. That's frustrating. All of a sudden, top of my head, I'm blanking on. I'm going to make sure to include his work, which you should be following. I was going to give you the name of the thing, which somehow lost me all of a sudden. But on a side note about that, we're going to be trying to help promote T's work and put some of this on TLAV to help get some more reach on it and so on. But make sure you're finding, and I'm bringing this up right here so you guys can see it on the YouTube channel. Make sure you guys support his work. He's out there doing this for free because he believes in it. And it's powerful stuff. This is just one aspect of basically what this documentary is. And it was about 14 minutes. Is one part of it's about me in the beginning, just TLAV and what we do, or rather just the TLAV and me through that. And then the Union of the Unwanted was a part of it. And there's an overlap there because a lot of us were at the carnival recently, for Steve's Carnival. And so it's really, really well done stuff. But I wanted to share that with you to show the opening part of that, the part that was just focused on what we said and how relevant that is to today. and really just a lot of stuff going on, but specifically Iran and Israel's attacks on Iran with the U.S. support, or rather, whichever way you want to look at that, and how important that really is to what's going on. And for those that are paying attention, not getting pulled into these partisan, childish, naive, binary narratives every single day, have seen this coming for a very long time and didn't buy the Netanyahu and Trump are dividing or splitting apart despite all the screams of partisan influencers. Clearly, you've been paying attention and you saw that this was one more of another ploy, one of a long string of manipulations to get us to not pay attention to what they've always been trying to accomplish. So check out his work just on the opening point. Support him. I hope you will, because he's doing amazing work. And just check out the ones with Derek and the ones with Havorie and the different people from the IMA. He's doing amazing work on this. So just starting with that, and one more shout out before we get into everything else. I was on Fine Points this morning. Fine Points is with a BitChute podcast with Bruce Fine and Jeffrey Wernick and myself. I join here and there, and it's just really great conversations, really focused on, and we don't agree on everything, as always. I never will with anybody I talk to, quite frankly, most likely. But we focus on things that we can discuss constitutionally, the law, the reality of it, the precedents therein. Bruce being somebody who goes back into, I think, the Reagan administration, a constitutional expert. Really great conversation. I think it's worth checking out. We touch on a lot of things I'm going to go over today. Now, today, what we're going to get into in general, I'm going to start with a few points that I just don't want you to miss around partisanship, but we're going to get into this this yesterday into today from the Iran conversation, the outage that was very conspicuous, like the day they attack Iran. And I'm not going to say I can prove to you I know that's connected, but you know as well as I that a logical person is going to go, that overlap is very conspicuous and it's worth interrogating. Was this an example of where we're going with the technocratic structure, with this global kind of, whether it's AI or surveillance or the censorship dynamics to where they can make something like that happen when it's important? It's worth considering. Regardless, we saw a massive outage and all of a sudden Israel's bombing Iran. And we're going to go through today the evidence that shows very clearly, despite the screams of yesterday and the morning today, that Trump didn't know and they're played him, or now he's just saying this because he doesn't want to look bad. It's very clear, as anybody who's paying attention can see already and knew before, that the U.S. is involved in this. They came out hot and let's be clear, long before this, Biden even before, all on the same page. But this Trump administration, just like the last one, early on, Iran needs to do this, and we're going to bomb you to hell and back, or whatever he said, unless you do what we say. Gun to the head kind of negotiations, which never work. Important to understand how this starts and understand that the U.S. is now clearly involved to the point to where they're involved right now with the back and forth that we'll get to. The moving of ships, the bombing into Israel by Iran. And of course, that's now an egregious terrorist attack, despite the fact that they're literally responding to an unprovoked attack by Israel, despite the narratives of what they claim they're doing, even if what they say they're doing is true in regard to nuclear weapons, processes, does not make what they did legal. It's pretty insane to see the Western lockstep narrative of we stand by Israel, literally making the point of anybody highlighting how obvious it is that Israel's influencing government action. Well, we're going to go over where that is to this point and all the different updates on that. But then we're going to talk about, if we have time, depending on what we get to, the conversation of LA. Well, it's below this. Well, you can't see it on the screen right now, but we'll get to that. And the conversation of the overlap of these two, right? The immigration conversation, the interesting point around Iran and how that plays into it, but then also the very jarring shift of Donald Trump, which again, if you've been paying attention before this one moment and you see the lie of the two-party illusion, this probably won't shock you. But the interesting development of Trump veering away at the peak of the rhetoric to say that all these illegal immigrants are okay. And he's already said this once, by the way, but he really went into it this time and made it very clear. We're talking about illegal immigrants, and the ones that we want to stay are okay. It's just blatant hypocrisy, contradiction. And a lot of his own base are pretty unhappy about it. And then, of course, there's another part of that where he talks about 500,000 Chinese visa students. And again, this is not good, bad, right, or wrong. It's for you to decide. The point is contradiction to what he's telling his people, what his screaming base, that's not all conservatives, but the team sport politics side are telling everybody. All immigrants are bad. What Stephen Miller just oozing out of his mouth every day about how bad every one of them are no matter what, calling all of them the worst people, and doing something like this. Both of the stories, farmers and leisure and his hotels, those ones are okay after they go after people who are literally here legally and seeking visas, asylum, and then, and people, it's just all hypocrisy. And of course, the Chinese aspect is interesting with Loomer and the rest acting like China's invading this country, which we should consider. But interesting how that's being stated when everything else shows you something else. Him and Jones the same way, having conversations about how this is a Chinese overtaking with the communist overtaking through the revolutions of the protests and riots. Certainly possible. I just need facts personally, not just conjecture based on the convenient narrative that pulls you away from the obvious of what's going on in the world. Certainly could be both, couldn't it? But the evidence is what matters to me. And all that while Trump then goes, but these students are okay, and we'll give them visas, and they can all stay and saying we'll give them citizenship afterward. It just does not line up. So that's what we're going to overarchingly get into today, but there's a few points in between that you will see. First, I want to make sure I shout out this interview we put out yesterday. Frustratingly enough, as you guys briefly just saw, that the internet was all over the place yesterday. Rather, we'll get to it in a minute. It was, I guess, it stemmed back to Amazon Cloud Services and Google Cloud Services, which, surprise, surprise, I'm so shocked that that's the choke point. Exactly like we're talking about. We should be running screaming from cloud services as far as I'm concerned right now. Yes, it's convenient. Yes, you can get away from having storage, but you also lose control. And it will be taken advantage of. I promise you. I think that's what we just saw. But as I was playing this interview yesterday, as I thought it was back up, it was choppy and it was all over the place. So Odyssey is a place where this is uploaded seamlessly, as well as why I'm showing you this. The Substack, I posted that before it went out because the internet was down. So that'll be a completely seamless viewing of it. Shannon Joy and I had a really great conversation. I really do appreciate her perspective on things. And she's going to invite me on her show as well. And I just think it's important to overlap different opinions and overlap audiences. And we kind of have a joke behind the scenes. Like, we've been trying to connect here and there. And it's just, I could go off for 10 minutes about the weirdness of missing messages or things that don't pop up or pop up later. Or side note, I haven't even gotten into the new phone switches. There's some weird stuff I could talk about in there that I think is deliberately manipulative, electronic SIM cards and all that. But with a new shift, I had this whole process where people's information, their text, their phone calls, the voice messages were ending up on my old phone that's actually in a blackout pouch. Explain that for me. And I missed all these messages until I look at the old phone like weeks later and go, and not on my new phone. Now, that just sounds like a glitch to me, but either way, the point is, I feel like people don't want certain audiences to overlap, to connect, because momentum builds. So watch this interview, and I think you'll get a sense of what I mean because of how much we align and see these things, the illusion, the manipulations of all of it. And I think it's a problem for a dwindling, vulnerable narrative right now for people like us to overlap. Just my personal opinion. But check it out. Great conversation. Now, some two-party illusion stuff that I do actually think is relevant. I tried to kick off as much as I could that isn't relevant to the main two topics today, but I think this is relevant to a few overarching points to what we're discussing. You might have seen this. And it's really kind of a petty point, really, but I do think it has more meaning than you might think. This is Rand Paul saying, I've just been told that I've been uninvited. Now, to be clear, Trump is saying that's not true, but I haven't sussed out the reality of it yet. But he's saying, I've been uninvited from the White House picnic. This is on the 11th. Every Democrat has been invited, every Republican invited, but he hasn't been allowed. Now, just think about that. If all Democrats are invited, but one of the only two, at least somewhat leaning in the direction of America first, I only say that because I'm pessimistic to all government and, question everything. But my point is Massey and Rand Paul represent at least the most clear America first, legitimate, their principles seem to be far more in line with that than almost everybody in his administration. And yet he's the one boxed out. I just think it's interesting. Massey says, incredibly petty and short-sighted of Trump's staff to exclude Republicans from an annual White House picnic while inviting Pelosi and every Democrat. He says, I always give my few tickets to my staff and their kids, but apparently this year my tickets have been withheld as well. Massey also. So let's pretend. So as the narrative comes around that it wasn't true, it's either somebody else doing it or either way. But either way, that's embarrassing and shows you something very important, that it's about ideology. It's about those not towing the line, whether left or right. And I think these two stand out in that exact regard, whether it's Israel, whether it's foreign. Every conversation, and you know it. Now, these are things that I'm talking about. And I'll just show you this right now. Here's Massey again saying, bring this bill to the floor. This is an easy no vote for anyone who took their oath to the Constitution seriously. So speaking of the two-party illusion grifter types, here's Nick Sorter yet again, cheering on the violence against innocent people, cheering on the fact that Trump just openly yet again said something that is textbook unconstitutional, that people will be arrested for burning the flag. Now, regardless of what you think about that, as Massey will tell you, Rand Paul will tell you, Ron Paul will tell you, and the Constitution will tell you, Supreme Court precedents will tell you, sort of like the conversation of illegal immigrants and whether they have rights. They do, regardless of your ignorance on the matter. It's very clear through the legal reality. Same thing here. Whether or not you think it's okay, it is the constitutionally protected reality that if you want to burn this flag or any other flag, you have the right to. And here is Trump for the third time that I'm aware of pushing the idea that they should be arrested for that. To the cheers of people, by the way, that I found very interesting, turns out and this is from military.com. Bragg soldiers who cheered Trump's political attacks while in uniform were checked for allegiance and appearance. They literally turned away military who did not have a very certain mindset. You're all being played. I mean, all of us. I shouldn't say it's not directed to one. I mean, you could argue it's more directed towards one audience, but anybody they're creating a very clear picture to manipulate Americans right now. That is what it looks like. That's straight up, not just propaganda. That's Orwellian. And people were, I don't want to go into all of this. There's all sorts of moments you could talk about with the cheering about things you may not think are okay to cheer about, whatever. My point is simply about that happening in general. And the idea that that's one of these clips of them cheering on whatever Trump said, because that was the whole point of creating that construct. Here's what Nick has to say. The fake America First types out there, they're screaming about everything's America First and Democrats hate the country. Well, everything they seem to do goes against that very premise. Now, I don't know for sure that they know that. I think it could be a mix of ignorance, willful ignorance, and just straight up dishonesty. But there are a lot of people out there that I see as the ones destroying the America First idea, who are the ones leading that charge, or pretending to anyway. He says, President Trump announced he will be supporting legislation, but by the way, regardless of whether it passes through legislation, it doesn't change the reality that it's unconstitutional. That is Supreme Court precedent, Mabur versus Madison and others, which if it is repugnant to the Constitution, it's null and void. Now, I'm not going into all of that yet again. The reality is very clearly that if you look at the Bill of Rights, which is just simply the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, you will recognize that every one of them did in no way contradicted or repugnant to any other part of it. That's why it was legitimate. And the ruling eventually came through because there were efforts to do so, that if you try to pass a law that is repugnant to the Constitution, meaning it's contradictory, it is null and void, whether or not you pass it, whether or not all of our illegitimate Congress members think it's okay. That's the important reality. That's why that's the shall not be infringed, inalienable right dynamic, whether you're talking about Constitution or any of it. Same thing with suspending this or changing that, or during COVID-19 saying we can turn this off because passage. It's the same point. It applies both left and right, same conversation. So in this case, if you're trying to pass legislation that makes something happen that is unconstitutional, well, it is illegitimate. But see, these are America First people that either don't know that or don't care. But he goes on to say 1 year in jail for burning the flag. He says, we've now seen illegals do this multiple times. That's quite frankly irrelevant. He says, over the past several days, what difference does it make? It's more outrageous because somebody else, should it be less outrageous if somebody else does it? It's just, they're trying to make an emotional plea to people to act like that's more, that they're here illegally and they're spitting in your eye kind of a thing. This is all about emotional manipulation. He says all patriots should support this. That's my real point. Either he doesn't know what that means, or he has a completely different definition of patriot or America First. Of course, even now, and this wasn't there when I shot this yesterday, flag burning is protected under the First Amendment. I mean, it's right on the platform that he feels supports. Think about how silly that is. And I simply said, this is before that was up there, all patriots should support. Admit you don't care about or don't understand the Constitution without saying you don't care about or understand the Constitution. This is openly unconstitutional. Fake America First, two-party illusion. And interestingly, Glenn Greenwald saw this and said, one of the most vocal advocates for criminalizing American flag burning has been Hillary Clinton. She repeatedly sponsored laws to provide for jail time. You see, because that's the real point. They are the same thing when it comes to using whatever they can to suppress you, left or right, simply people. The peons they see as under them. The problem is the Supreme Court twice ruled flag burning is protected expression. So it would require a change to the First Amendment, which is the reality being not possible. You understand? You can't alter inalienable, inherent rights through legislation, and then that would become, you get the point. That's the whole thing. You can't just change these by legislation, but they've tricked a lot of people, probably like Nick Sorter, into thinking that way, or they don't care. It's your choice. So I said, so you're politically aligned with Hillary Clinton, Nick, but I doubt that will alter your blind allegiance to the narrative that you're told to push, even if blatantly unconstitutional, and as you claim, you be America First. Now, again, Thomas Massey says very clearly, these are people that forgot their oath to the Constitution. So I think it's very worth understanding that, because this is a major thing channeling through people claiming they care more about the Constitution than anybody else or anything else. And now they don't care. Now, this is either a combination of people that are using this because they're not and they actually want to destroy this country to trick people in that direction, or just ignorance of that reality. Now, here, just in case, just so it's relevant, I have 3 clips showing you this is not a different, this is a consistent pattern from Trump. That these things don't matter if it bumps up against what he wants to achieve. And he'll straight up call you an idiot, a moron, for arguing unconstitutional or free speech. Here's what he said. Now, I'm going to show you 3 things. One is about a previous flag point. One is about the internet, and one is about guns. All of it has the same consistent pattern, and you know it.
Took the American flag down. They were writing Hamas on the bell outside of Union Station. What does a Donald Trump do if he takes office to these people on the street?
Rarely have we seen anything like this, and I think you should get a 1-year jail sentence if you do anything to desecrate the American flag. Now, people will say, oh, it's unconstitutional. Those are stupid people.
In other words, people that understand the Constitution.
Those are stupid people that say that. We have to work in Congress to get a 1-year jail sentence when they,
which would be illegal, or rather unconstitutional, and therefore null and void, regardless of whether they pass the law. This is basic reality, guys. If you don't understand these things, it's worth your time. It behooves you to learn about it, because this is the reality. This is not a nuanced point. This is not some different opinion about it. This is the static reality. And that's why this is so important to understand. He either doesn't understand this or is trying to deceive you.
they're allowed to stomp on the flag and put lighter fluid on the flag and set it afire. And when you're allowed to do that, you get a 1-year jail sentence and you'll never see it again. And all over the world, Putin and President Xi of China, all over the world, they're watching this. Kim Jong-un, he looks at us like we're a bunch of babies. They see.
It's just emotional BS, guys. They're just trying to get you to feel stupid and get reactionary, so you react in the direction of what they want to achieve. And it has nothing to do with the flag. You think they give an S? They don't care about that. They want to use this as a foot in the door to rationalize why, if we claim it's something that's bad, we can illegalize it, even if it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's transparent, guys. Here's the one about the guns, Second Amendment. Right? And this is all about due process. It's about your rights. In this case, we'll do due process later. How does that sound?
The firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system. Because a lot of times by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. To go to court would have taken a long time. So you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
Now something that I haven't said in the past in this, because I feel like it's self-evident. This shows you that he either doesn't understand what due process means, like Cristian, by the way, or he's lying to you about it, or trying to convince you through this kind of propagandized media, framing that is the way it works. Remember, Cristian literally responded around habeas corpus saying that it's something the president has to X, Y, and Z, and then when pushed, says Lincoln used it. Lincoln did not use habeas corpus. He suspended it and then literally had to follow up with Congress because it was deemed illegal until that happened, which was then considered legal, because you can't do that. Congress has the right to do that. If you're talking about suspending habeas corpus, there's only 2 times to do that. And it's a whole conversation about legal realities of the Constitution, acts of Congress. None of that's happening. This is him telling you due process later, which means he doesn't understand what that means. You can't have due process later. That invalidates the reality of what due process means. Now, you can have a process later, like Garcia's going through, but that's not due process, because you've already been dealt with, and then you're being forced to handle it after the fact. Because if you had given due process, you would have been able to have a back and forth about the facts that then led to what happened. This is insane. It is shocking, and it's unconstitutional. Here's another example, and this was 2016, I believe, and even talks about working with Bill Gates to shut down the internet, because I guess it was about ISIS, I think, at the time.
Because we're losing a lot of people because of the internet. And we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people. We have a lot of foolish people.
Okay. So had Biden said we need to close down parts of the internet because of transgender stuff, I'm sure you'd have been okay with that, right? Because, well, he's got his logic, right? I mean, just because it's a thing you think, whatever the narrative is, it's the same principle. And you know as well as I that would never stand for you, but people ignored this because it's your person, just like people ignored Biden and so on and so on. It's just a two-party illusion. But Bill Gates, of course, let's work with Bill Gates because he's on our side, right? Well, he apparently is now again, because now he's working with Trump for the mRNA platform, but no one wants to talk about that. Okay, well, here is the current example. This is the newest one. This is from, I think, it was when he was at Fort Bragg.
But they proudly carry the flags of other countries, but they don't carry the American flag.
Which is their right. It's called the Constitution.
They only burn it. Did you see a lot of the flags being burned? They weren't being burned by...
And they don't only burn it. There is plenty of people that you can see that have American flags. Even in these protests, there's plenty of people that have flags they're not burning. I mean, it's just dishonest to always frame it as one way. But see, that's the idea. That's like showing some of the violence and claiming it's all riots. Exactly what they did to you last time. But you guys clearly continue to demonstrate that you partisans are exactly the same, and you do the same thing back to them and cry foul. Most of us, I think the majority of liberals, conservatives, and just people that see through all of it recognize that contradiction. I'm hoping people can start to look at that. I'm convinced. I think there's just people that's why this is getting so ridiculous. And so like Jones is standing out like a sore thumb because most people are pulling away from how dumb this all is. And if they just adhere to the cartoon, it becomes even more obvious.
People from our country or from people that love our country. People that burn the American flag should go to jail for 1 year. That's what they should be doing.
So imagine saying this for the third time, despite people, experts, no doubt, telling him that's unconstitutional. The point is he doesn't care. If you think for a second that he doesn't know that, or you're still of the mind that that's not true, the last part of it, then you're still completely and shockingly uninformed. But if you think he somehow doesn't know that, then you're just being naive. Or you're admitting that he completely is out of the know of basic things, which should be scary in its own right. I mean, that's the general point. I mean, it goes on from the same idea. So this is just included, by the way, on this long string of things saying he'll censor you for Israel. But these last two I included because I thought it was important around due process and free speech. And I'll have to include that, the last one. So what's important, okay, and I've already showed you this briefly, but just you can read the military.com article. Bragg soldiers who cheered Trump's political attacks while in uniform were checked for allegiance, for appearance. That should insult everybody. Because that's not real, guys. He's giving you a false impression because he thinks the military cheering for him will give and it probably will influence certain people. Now, I want to include this because I think it's important to think about in a larger sense. But look, let's be clear. Obviously, I know a lot of this is trolling, guys. I'm not an idiot. I understand that people are out there trying to manipulate, like scare people, but in a way that is meant to push them, like to manipulate, to laugh at them, to think they're overreacting. But at the end of the day, again, not partisan and being objective about it and looking at this, the track record, what do we see? We see the things that they go, oh, you're just falling for the thing, and then it becomes real. Oh, they're not really going for Greenland. You guys are so easy to play. Oh, now we're going for Greenland. Like, I mean, it's an objective person can very clearly see that things that get floated, like running for a third term, that then kind of borderline become maybe, or maybe become real, are not jokes. Even if they are jokes, if they recognize they might work and enough people support it, they'll do damn near anything. And I'm talking about the U.S. government, not Donald Trump alone. My point in showing you this, though, is to recognize, as well as I, and it's not even a secret. There have been people and prominent ones who have openly discussed that Trump should be ruling forever. And I genuinely mean that. And you know that as well as I. I'm not saying this represents everybody, but I use this just to make a broader point. This person says, me and my family, we love King Trump. Because you remember the protest, I think it's tomorrow, is no kings. And the whole thing is about, they're trying to make it a communist uprising, which, maybe it is. But facts should matter to you. My point is, it's obvious to see that the U.S. government is benefiting from using our left-right deploys and having Jones and the rest call this a Chinese communist overtaking, or somehow at the same time a Mexican revolution from California, or maybe alternatively Americans who are mad at ICE and they're breaking the law. Whichever one you want to play it. All at the same time. Apparently, very Israeli propaganda of you. The reality is, you can clearly see that there's some of this that is about promoting the idea that Trump should be able to circumvent the Supreme Court, should be able, because we have a mandate, don't understand how these things work. But the bigger picture is that whether it's a joke or not, that people float these things, and it just shows you a sentiment that they do, there are people that really do think this. And and on the left too, they would argue like remember the whole point at the beginning was that if we allow them to win this, there'll never be another election. I mean, it's obvious that what a ridiculous, anything's possible. There was no evidence to suggest this one was the last one, but they just needed you to lean in because they knew this big shift that was going to take place. But obviously, If Biden was allowed to win, well, that's the same point, right? They'll be in there forever. And many people said good because Trump was a bad guy. It's obvious that this is a part of it. And I said a large part of the Republican base, I'm just making it a point about right now, it's all partisans in my opinion, has thoroughly lost the plot and are now cheering on exactly what they said they were fighting moments ago. Most see it. It's not new, but important to point out for those who are not blind followers. Again, and thus feel a bit lost. You're not alone is the point. I'm sure there's people that feel they're on a certain side that are going, God, I'm not going to be on that side, but I feel kind of isolated right now from what I thought was happening over here. Realize there's more than two sides, guys. You're not alone. There's a lot of people out there that have many different multifaceted opinions. Join the objective middle ground here of people that actually can think beyond the partisan lens. It's important to see that. I just wanted to point that out. Now, lastly, of course, that I was already saying, here's Jones on the 11th. Think about the timing of all this, guys. Deep state expert Naomi Wolf's warned the Democrat NGO complex is working directly with the CCP to trigger a violent civil war. Yeah, that's where this all goes. You've got Luke Kradowski and everyone. There was civil war. Or if you listen to Jones 4 days ago, apparently we were already in World War III. But I guess that one's been put down because it didn't happen, even though he swore that it was there already. Or the Netanyahu and Trump split and they hate each other, except, oops, that one was wrong too. We'll put that one down and we'll just lean into whatever makes you not see the most obvious thing happening in the room. I just can't understand how people can't see beyond the nature of what this is. And I said, of course, it's obviously China, guys. Just look around at all the politicians waving Chinese flags and all the censorship of those calling out China and all the U.S. legislation that supports arms and protects China, even to the detriment of Americans. Or am I missing something? Silly to me. It's almost cartoonish. So talking about that, and we're going to come back to that point later. This is important to overlap with the Iran discussion. Again, the point of all of that was two-party manipulation, and all of a sudden we have this massive move that I'll show you very clearly was already planned, that they were already involved with, that Trump and even an Israeli report claims at the very least from Times of Israel that Trump was well aware, and the moment he got into power, they made this plan, which, by the way, perfectly lines up with the exact thing we already talked about, Adelson and the money to annex the West Bank, the deal of faking the ceasefire deal so they could take over Gaza, all of this. And if they did, broke it in the second phase, then Trump would allow them to take X, Y, and Z. It all lines up. And I believe this was part of it. And so the report, as we'll come back to, is that they knew this from the beginning, and it was about lulling Iran into belief that no attack was coming. A lot of us were saying this early because it's very obvious the possibility if you're simply paying attention. So massive outages all day yesterday, and Israel just happens to attack Iran. What a coincidence. Now, it very well could be, but I think it's worth understanding how crazy this was in regard to what actually happened. Now, I grabbed this from StreamYard because this is what I saw, and this is what they claimed. Google Cloud Services has experienced a global outage that may be affecting StreamYard. Now, it says the global outage is the point that I think is important. So one, get away from cloud services, in my opinion, but realize that this is a massive thing that affected a lot. And maybe something major was done while all these things were down. Maybe not. Maybe ultimately it was about trying to hide things. People didn't stream it. I tried to show my interview. It didn't work. So realize that at that time, people were probably hesitant, or maybe it wasn't even working properly when they could have been reporting on real-time discussions of what they were doing in Iran. Worth considering, right? Now, in regard to knowing that they were involved, it's actually pretty crazy to see the coping going on around this story. Now, here's Jerusalem Post. Israeli official, there was full and complete coordination with the Americans. Now, I'll be the first to point out that, as I've said many times, Israel has an interest. They always seem to do that. And that's not always the truth, you understand. But weirdly enough, even when they lie about what the U.S. is doing or how they're involved because it makes them look like they're controlling the U.S., most often the U.S. doesn't correct it, doesn't even talk about it, which I think proves my point. But my point is to say that doesn't prove it's real. They would say that just to get the impression to the world that they're able to manipulate the U.S. that easily. But I'm of the mind this is very obviously the case, that they were fully and completely involved. And I'm going to get to the points where Trump seems to be admitting that publicly. But I said a lot of coping going on. Partisans will manufacture whatever story makes their chosen ideologue look how they prefer. Not a peace president, guys. That's not what that looks like. Israeli, that they're full and complete coordination with the Americans. And I think I have all these lined up in here too. I believe so. I did it on a thread just in case people want to see it. But, and I'll point out, by the way, I've been pointing out the very, very obvious suppression on this platform and plenty of others on my account and plenty of others on this platform. But I'm not trying to make it more, because if you look for yourself, look at the engagement of this account from yesterday to today, or just the last. It's kind of insane. I mean, look at this, guys. These things are pinned. I mean, it's just kind of crazy. Look at the views, 495. Because if you're going to pretend that content is not actually engaged with because it's not good, you would see views. You wouldn't see likes and retweets. If you're going to pretend that I can, with 75,000 people following this account, that I get 495 people even seeing it, and you think that makes sense, I mean, I got a bridge to sell you. Very clearly, that is dramatic suppression. And why do you think that is? Because we're walking through an Israeli manipulated platform that if you can deny that today, I don't even know how you're alive. I mean, that is one of the most obvious things in this conversation, from CHEQ, from Authentics and Netanyahu and Elon Musk. I mean, ADL with Yacarino. It's wildly obvious. And now even more so that people like us talking about things right now that contradict the partisan narrative are being dramatically suppressed. Oh, wait, did I finish reading that? Yeah, I did. Okay. And now Michael Tracy points to a Fox News report saying Trump confirms he was aware. Now, many people are immediately trying to go, well, he's saying that not to embarrass himself, which is so interesting to me. So you're willing to say that he's dishonest as long as it makes him not the immediate culprit, which is kind of the longer point. Is I say, well, yeah, so he's been lying to you. Can't you consider that the others were lies? No, not that. But this one was. So the point is he's lying about being involved because he doesn't want to seem like he wasn't involved. So he's petty. He's dishonest. Like, how is that the better answer? It's so strange to me. But the evidence is clearly now showing that he was involved. So my point on top of that is that people that support him will manufacture, like I said, whatever seems to make it all make sense for their picture before having any facts. That's alarming. Now he says Trump confirms he was aware of the strikes in advance and says he hopes this will bring Iran back to the negotiating table. This is my point from the very beginning. What did I tell you? They will not bend to negotiations at the barrel of the gun. And they've said this very clearly. And they don't want it, is the point. Israel does not want Iran to come to the table. They want conflict so they can take advantage of it. And so Trump acting like, do what we say or you're going to be bombed, and acting like they're not negotiating with us. Again, it's just childish. And honest people can see that that was never designed to cause an actual deal. But what's important is, as this bombing was taking place, they were under the illusion of a deal. They were under the mind that they were working on some kind of a deal. And in the midst of that potential deal, even if whether genuinely sought or not, Israel bombs Iran, which, by the way, is not even the first or second time that exact circumstance has taken place. But let's all keep pretending like this is the corporate media, the way they grapple with these stories like we haven't seen this exact thing before, is always childish and kind of comical if it wasn't so serious. But it says we're officially through the looking glass. He says bombing their nuclear facilities and killing their leadership, just a gentle prod to keep negotiating. It's insane. Now, whether or not, I'm sure you might, in real time, there might be stuff developing that they actually killed the leadership they claim. That's why I'm not really going to get into it today. They get caught lying about that stuff all the time, or just projecting what they want you to think happened. Often enough, like Baghdadi, for example, they'll say we got him, and 7 times later they do the same thing. We got him. No, he shows back up later. We got him. Who knows? If we can confirm that in some way, I will tell you when we find out. But then on top of that, their nuclear facilities, we'll get into the point about whether we're actually talking about nuclear bomb facilities or nuclear civilian facilities, which very much matter. And either way, doesn't that seem a little bit dangerous? It does, but they don't care. But here's what Fox News had to say.
Yeah, I just spoke to President Trump. One thing, the president was aware of Israel's action before it happened. There were no surprises here, but he gave me a quote.
I will say one thing. It is fair to point out that is what I might expect, especially from Israel, by the way, that they don't want to look stupid. And so the lie would make sense in a logical perspective to say you don't want to look like you're that easily manipulated, so you'll lie about it. But my point is the evidence very clearly points to that they were involved from day one. So, and on top of that, that people will then make that narrative up without knowing for sure because they just want to give them a pass. But it's clear they're involved, in my opinion.
He said Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. We're hoping to get back to the negotiating table. We'll see. There are several people in leadership in Iran that will not be coming back.
And realize, as the 100th time we've had this conversation, that according to everything, including the State Department, including previous International Atomic Energy Agency investigations before the recent skirt back and forth, I'll get to in a minute, all of them consistently pointed out they are not seeking nuclear weapon. That's not to say that they're not. Might be just being objective. Who knows? Maybe there's a secret something going on somewhere. But realize they've claimed for a long time, and Robert's been expertly talking about this forever, that from the leadership, their mind is that's a religious violation to them. And so the bottom line is they've said we're not going to, and the evidence backs that up, but it's not to say we know for sure. So all you have is the insinuation from Israel, we'll get to in a minute, for 50 years continuing to tell you they're 4 months away, they're 30 seconds away, and then never having that happen. Not because something took place that stopped it, but just because they wait and come back to it later. And you have the Grahams of the world, the Trumps of the world, everybody else, all of his Zionist cabinet, just blindly regurgitating the exact narrative, despite the evidence of even the U.S. government State Department saying that's not the reality. It just doesn't change.
Now, the president, I know, has spoken to Prime Minister Netanyahu several times in recent days. As I mentioned before, the Trump administration reached out to a key Middle Eastern ally beforehand to acknowledge this strike was going to happen, but that the U.S. was not involved in the strike, but the goal still...
That also appears to be false.
...to get Iran back to the negotiating table. There was this building frustration about what Iran was doing at that negotiating table with Steve Witkoff, the Middle East envoy. He was scheduled again for Sunday. Looks like, obviously, that may change the dynamic there, whether that...
Oh, I think I was muted. My point about Witkoff was simply that he appears to have been on Israel's side from day one. We'll get to that in a second, which doesn't surprise anybody, I'd imagine.
Moves forward at all. Depends on what Iran does in response. The president told me he's, looking to see what the retaliation may be. CENTCOM is on high alert. The U.S. will defend. Will help defend Israel if needed.
Why? If they're not involved, then why are they helping defend? I mean, it's obvious to see how this plays out, and to recognize that even though they have based on their own narratives, Iran has like the textbook example of being able to respond, but they're already calling it terrorism and saying, you should not respond. There's no like everything from von der Leyen to every leader of a country, ruler. They're all coming out and saying, if you respond, it'll be terrorism. Just again, a child could see the contradiction in that logic. And
as I mentioned in the last time we talked, the Iron Dome has been replenished in Israel in recent weeks.
Yeah, I mean, my opinions. That is facade. That is a straight up manipulation. I don't believe that even functions the way we think it does, but people disagree with me. I mean, the evidence is ridiculous to see how often. I mean, Robert and I have had conversations, and he does agree that there's something off, but he doesn't fully agree with the way I see it, which is important to consider. I bow to him on on all this stuff, but there's so much evidence that this is almost like a money laundering operation, or just like it's a lie. It's not successful the way they claim it is. And every time we see an example like from Yemen, or right now, it doesn't seem to actually stop what they claim. I mean, or you can go to the point, the Golan Heights, where it seems to almost be used in quote, accidentally, but seems almost deliberately to claim to fire at something and have the bomb fly back down and bomb the people in the Druze community, which has happened more than once.
So there's still this hope in the president's sense and the people around him that this changes the dynamic for Iran, and that this does not launch into what will be a back and forth. But we just saw...
And the only thing that will stop that is if Iran shows restraint, which it almost always does in this exact kind of dynamic. Same thing we saw with Syria and Russia. That's not the same as saying good guy, bad guy. It's just showing you people that understand the reality of the situation. And that's why it behooves, I shouldn't say it like that, but in their minds, Israel and the United States to constantly be belligerent, because that shows people like that if you do even what's legally required or allowed, we will go back 20 times harder. And then again, and again, and again, and then claim you're the terrorist. And they know that. And the world knows that. And so what it does is causes these right now, they know that it's a calculation. If they respond, which they have a right to, and in a way we'll get to in a minute, it seems they're bombing inside of Israel and bombing Tel Aviv, then they hope, I would argue, that the world recognizes and steps in, which I find hard to believe with all the statements that we support Israel, and acknowledge that was a legal response. Problem is, that doesn't seem to be where it goes. So it's that weighing of whether they but if they don't respond, they look really weak to their own people, to the world, and it probably gets taken, then Israel probably takes more advantage of them. Okay? That's kind of the calculation right now, which is probably pretty difficult.
The post from the Supreme Leader saying that this is the beginning of a major retaliation and that Israel, in his words, has sealed its fate. U.S. officials are confirming to us that a number of top Iranian officials, leaders, are dead after these strikes.
So they claim, but I'm going to wait for more confirmation because they lie about everything. But so what's interesting is to see, so where does it go from here? I mean, obviously, this could escalate in very obvious ways. I get the sense that this will be a response, probably why the U.S. already moved its troops out of Iraq. Yes, they did the day before yesterday, because they didn't know, obviously they did. And I bet you that's giving Iran the clearance. Maybe there was an agreement, which happens before, to bomb Iraq and claim, we're bombing your installation. Trump will cry foul. Nothing will happen. Yeah, maybe there's more coordination. I mean, as Brad Miller will rightly ask, are there elements inside Iran that are simply adhering to some larger globalist ideology and they're taking direction because this is all theater? Very much worth your time to consider. But, we have to engage what we can prove, right? And the point is that the back and forth in past is used to de-escalate, but then Israel takes advantage of it like they've done before. But interesting to consider that. Now we have this clip, or rather this, that's right, I put this first. This is Express News breaking down the plan, which we'll show you on Times of Israel and others. Netanyahu planned to attack Iran and signed the war plan immediately after Trump's election or selection, which is exactly what we've expected. Whether it's the plan for Gaza, I mean, guys, they discussed what this would be, and the rest of it's been theater, and they're basically starting to admit that to you. Israel worked to mislead Iran about the timing of its airstrikes, but a comment by Donald Trump nearly alerted Tehran. 2 hours before the attack, Trump issued a calming message, which helped Iran lower its guard, allowing Israel to strike by surprise, or that's how they're framing it anyway. Though the Israeli cabinet meeting was said to focus on a hostage deal, it was actually held to approve the attack. Israel then launched airstrikes across Iran, killing top military leaders and hitting key nuclear missile sites. The plan has been signed off by Netanyahu after Trump's election win. Now, the idea of, hold on, I'll come back to that. The plan has been signed by Netanyahu right after Trump's election win, U.S.-backed, ranging from passive support to active help. Despite leaks that nearly exposed the operation, the final decision was approved on June 2nd. Most Israeli political leaders, including ultra-Orthodox party heads, were left unaware, but that's all their framing of it, so consider that. But I think the idea of where this goes, is that Iran, the targeting location of where they attack is going to make all the difference in the response. And since they've already bombed in Tel Aviv, I get the sense this is not going to end quickly, which is bad for everybody. Now, here's from Israel reporting, Channel 12, the topic of the cabinet meeting and Trump's message, the course of Israel's fraud. I mean, that's how Iran was surprised. It's all about the same conversation. It's public, but the reporting of Israeli reporting of what they're doing never seems to influence the left-right paradigm coverage of what they say Israel's doing in this country, which is confounding. But here's the actual Times of Israel report. U.S. helped lull Iran into belief no attack was imminent. It's very clear, but again, that's how they're framing it. Now, Trump confirmed on 11th the U.S. personnel being moved from parts of the Middle East. I mean, certainly you could argue that he felt that something might be happening, but you realize they've been building up to this. They've been floating this idea. The days before, it was like this, everyone's going, we think something's going to happen. It's not like they're psychic, guys. They're giving you the indication. They want you to, and this is a very clear example of how they knew that this is not only an attack was going to happen, but ultimately response. And I get the sense they're setting it up for an easy retaliation, which would benefit them. But clearly Iran's always showing you in this dynamic that they have more restraint than the belligerent actors that we're dealing with. Again, that's not good or bad. It's just being logical to understand that if you keep going this direction, Israel will always double down. And again, that's their tactic. And that's why a lot of these Americans supporting MAGA and what Trump, the might makes right, that's what they're pointing to. And they're not wrong in the logic of how it makes you win. But see, that's of the mindset of just winning over all else. Most of us don't care about winning and living over the ashes. You see, that's the mindset of people that are just belligerently about team sport politics. But Glenn points out what the squirrel said, and he's right. He was way ahead of this. This account, the squirrel, is a prophet, he says. When virtually everyone, except us, though, we said the same thing, believed there was basically a split between Trump and Netanyahu, Trump, and it was and Trump was determined to prevent Israel from bombing Iran, the claim anyway, only to now learn that the whole thing was a ruse. Well, you guys remember, I never once bought that story, and I've been very clearly pointing out the obvious indications that it was never true. And as I simply pointed out, and this is Axios reporting that Trump was publicly pretending to oppose the attack on Iran. That seems to be coming from every angle right now. And I simply said, so Alex Jones was wrong? You get the point. Hoping people can read into the larger point of not just this one example, but how often that comes to pass. But we talked about this, right? He came out and made this big point about how we called it. We knew the split was coming, and here's why. And like I said, I understand the logic of why you could eventually see that come to pass. I talked about that before he said he was right about that. The obvious point of why Netanyahu, I sensed, and I said this before the election, that he could be the scapegoat. But that's not a unique opinion. A lot of us say that because he's wildly unpopular and nobody on any side really likes him. And he's a criminal, according to his own people. And so it's easy to see how he could be pushed aside and the agenda can continue. So you see, he taps into things that are like already very publicly being discussed, but not really being put a spotlight on, and says, I knew it. But now he turned out to be wrong because he stated the fact before it happened because the agenda wanted you to think that. And you must think that either he's played by people that give him this information, or he somehow knows it'll turn out to be false, but doesn't care that it makes him look stupid. You guys can decide all of that, but that's important to understand because they're clearly not splitting at this point. They're aligned with this agenda. All of this was around the Iran idea that he's fighting Netanyahu to stop the Iran attack. They have been in line with this from day one. And that's the important thing to understand. Here's Decensored News, flashback, asked about this exact conversation.
Says that Israel should not target Iranian nuke facilities. What are your thoughts on that? What should Israel respond?
I mean, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's the biggest risk we have. The biggest risk we have is nuclear. I mean, to make the statement, please leave their nuclear alone, I would...
To the best of all of our knowledge and all the facts and all the evidence, including from the State Department, it's civilian nuclear program for energy. And not even close to the 90% needed to make the material needed to make a nuclear bomb. They love to hype the idea of where we're right, so many percentage away. You have to understand, again, hear that. Look at the percentage. I forget where it's at now. What is it, 60 something, whatever it is. You need to reach 90+% to make the material needed to make a nuclear bomb. That's not something they just snap their fingers and do. And the only reason they're increasing enrichment is because they're allowed to by the JCPOA deal that the U.S. Trump administration violated. And it was textbook. If they do that, you have the legal right to increase enrichment until they correct that problem. And they never did. And they're still telling you we're not seeking that. And they very clearly, by the evidence, continue to show you they're not. But all that's being said as they continue to frame it as they are doing so, because that's what Israel keeps saying.
Tell you that that's not the right answer. That was the craziest answer. Because you know what? Soon they're going to have nuclear weapons, and then you're going to have problems.
They asked.
You mean like every other country, including North Korea? What about all the screaming about North Korea nuclear bomb? Then they finally do it, then they never talk about them again. When's the last time you even heard about North Korea? Did they suddenly start being a good guy, or did they just? You see the point? You can't pretend like that was honest. So if the indication, and ask Gaddafi how that works, if you give up your nuclear weapons, then they kill you. Now, I'm not trying to make a case for good or bad or what with I don't want nuclear weapons to be used or created by these governments, but the reality of the current circumstance, with Israel being one of the only not signed on the nuclear proliferation treaty, yet having more nukes than anybody almost, it's very clear, well, I shouldn't say it like that, but more than like U.S., below Russia, U.S., and so on, but more than most everybody else. The idea being how insulting that is. Two of the most belligerent countries in the world clearly being the most dangerous with these, and yet telling everybody else they can't, that they don't want to. The legal reality is everybody has the right to seek these things as they see fit. They don't have the unilateral right to say you can't. And on top of that, the proliferation treaty, that was supposed to be them slowly reducing, and they're not doing that either. So everyone's a violation. It's just about might makes right today. Bottom line, the evidence is clear. And what they're trying to do is convince you to something that isn't happening, as far as I can tell, is happening, to go after this country. Now, I'll quickly jump ahead. I'll give credit to the point that comes from Alan McLeod. Had they had nuclear weapons, this would not be happening. Take a second to think about that. If they knew Iran actually had them, then this would not be happening. So you understand, Israel's not claiming, like when they need to, they still sell they're 30 seconds away. But alternatively, in between the 47 times they've said that over the last 50 years, they claim they do, though. They claim they claim they do have them. And so the bottom line is, if any of this was true, this would not be happening the way it was. Important to think about.
What do you think about Iran? Would you
hit Iran, and he goes, as long as they don't hit the nuclear stuff. That's the thing you want to hit, right? I said, I think he's got that one wrong. Isn't that what you're supposed to hit? I mean, it's the biggest risk we have.
Yeah, not the same as risking bombing a nuclear site, because that's not risky, right? I mean, see, the whole idea comes from whether you concern yourselves with people's lives and civilians, like you always claim you do. Like Trump's bad at keeping pretenses up, right? You're supposed to pretend that you're fighting for the freedom of these people against the bad government. But they've lost that. That's like not even relevant anymore. But that's supposed to be the claim. So when you're saying don't do that, that's not because Biden didn't want to. I don't think he's even aware of what he's saying or doesn't care. It's because you're supposed to pretend that we don't want that fallout. It's bad for everybody, right? But their only mindset is we got to stop them because that's what Israel wants. Or we have to stop them because they're the bad guy. Who cares about the fallout? Or they're just dangerously incompetent or uninformed. I mean, I don't know. But the bottom line is that's obviously why. And they just show you, I mean, that's one thing people say with Trump. It's just they takes the mask off, guys. We can see the reality, not him, but just of the government. And he is a perfect actor through that government.
Nuclear weapons, the power of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. But when they asked him that question, the answer should have been hit the nuclear first and worry about the rest later.
Yeah, so remember, this is at a time right now where they're trying to act like that's not what Trump wants. It's partisanship, guys. They will ignore whatever it takes.
And that's what they should. That's what if they're going to do it. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it. But we'll find out whatever their plans are. But great question. Thank you very much.
If you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran?
Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. Right, because laws don't matter. It's whatever they decide is okay for them. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Why do they all say Israel? Israel. That's like Lindsey Graham. I don't know. I understand. It's weird to me, but it seems pretty obvious. These people only care about an agenda. Michael Tracy says, reminder, Trump openly campaigned on allowing Israel to bomb Iran, so no one can say they've been blindsided and betrayed. Promises made, promises kept. Which is exactly. Now here is an important example. This is Tulsi Gabbard. And just like RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, I think personally, was used for this very purpose because she was a convincing presenter of anti-war. Even though it seems that she's not that, or at least that she doesn't care when it comes to her political career. But at the end of the day, she sold a lot of people that this is what Trump would be. But he's not. But just remembering that this is how they tricked you.
For Donald Trump is a vote for a man who wants to end wars, not start them.
And guys,
and who has demonstrated.
This is why they need you to think that it wasn't involved, or he's just trying to make sense of the situation. He's the deal maker. No, they were involved. They were a part of this, but they need you to take whatever low-hanging fruit they're providing to convince yourself that no, he really was, and he's just bound by what Israel's been doing. It's not the truth, guys. They lied to you here, and I think she knew that.
Already that he has the courage and strength to stand up and fight for peace.
Clearly
History will look back on us at this moment.
They will.
For the choice that we make.
You're damn right they
will. Did we choose war?
Yes.
Or peace?
War.
Did we choose poverty or prosperity? Did we choose censorship or freedom?
Censorship. Are we confused? I mean, that's not my look around, guys. There are Republicans calling this stuff out.
President Trump called me 3 hours after his shooting. And he said, would I come and sit down with them? And he said to me during that meeting, he said, there are some things that we can agree on and some we disagree on, but the landscapes on which we agree are so much larger. He said, I want to end the wars.
Yeah, it's so easy to say things, isn't it?
I want to end this surveillance and censorship. I want to protect the Constitution.
You could just say whatever you want, guys. That's what politics is. Doesn't mean they mean these things. And if you care about looking at the previous actions, right, and the precedent and the outcome of what's now been happening, then you have to know that's not true. But none of those things matter to people that have signed on to a team.
I want to protect freedom of speech. Oh, you think that we deserve a president who's going to end the warfare state and rebuild the middle class?
Do I need to leave a comment on that?
Oh, you want a president who's going to put America first?
Too bad. I sure would. Yeah, most definitely. Now here's this. I think it's ABC or no, Good Morning America. Just a clip, just highlighting all these different points. And this is even corporate media. Of course, the argument is that because they hate Trump and they're trying, which they probably do, doesn't mean that this is fake. But that's how this works. If it's come through certain channels, it gets reflexively dismissed. But I do think that's used quite often. But the point is, he's now responded, and this is from today, about what happened, and he thinks it's excellent. That matters.
Exactly what President Trump had been hoping to avoid for weeks. He's been trying to strike a nuclear deal with Iran and avoid a broader conflict. In fact,
you see, even people that supposedly hate Trump are feeding you the government line, right? If they hated him, they could easily expose that that's never been the case, but they need to, because this goes above left and right. It goes to the government control over your narrative and you. So what they need to push is that he was trying super hard and now he's, doesn't this clearly indicate to somebody objective that maybe he never was trying that, right? And now if he's okay with it, that means that he was okay with them bombing the very group he was in the middle of negotiating with. I mean, this is basic. These people do not care. Or these are talking heads, that the people pulling their strings, whoever the editors above them, whatever, they don't care. And they're pushing a narrative for whatever is guiding them.
In fact, just moments before these strikes overnight, the president had taken to social media calling for a diplomatic resolution. He had warned Netanyahu that an attack like this would be inappropriate.
See? Okay. Sure, we warn you. And then it happens and he goes, good stuff. It's excellent. And I'm on board and I was involved. And we did. So he lied to you, guys. That's the point to take away from it. Those of you out there that have been going along with him, fighting against the Iran war, he lied to you. He knowingly told you what you wanted to hear and is now flipped right into, it's all good and we're on board, it's excellent, and Iran nuclear missiles are bad. Okay, just like we're going to get to the immigration point. Telling you every immigrant's bad and we can't allow this, a scourge of our country, and Miller and Bondi and Noam just going aggressively and then going, okay, but all of these ones are okay though. Hotels and farms and, and the 500,000 Chinese visa students, and they can stay here as long as they want. I'm not even saying I'm not trying to get into good, bad, left, right. It's about contradictory hypocrisy. And showing you that if you think you can just trust what they're telling you, then you haven't been paying attention.
And said it would derail talks, that it would, quote, blow it. Now, just moments ago, the president speaking with our John Carl said of the attacks that he thinks it's been excellent. He said, we gave them a chance and they didn't take it. They got hit hard.
Okay, so understand, we gave them a chance, which is basically do what we say or we're going to bomb you. That was basically his tactic. And then they didn't do it. And so you're okay with them bombing them because they didn't agree to what you strong-armed and what you wanted? I mean, think about how insane that is. And then today going, now that they've done that, let's get back to negotiating. I mean, nobody believes that makes sense other than people that are blindly adherent to a partisan agenda. It's insane. And we all see it. Time to start calling this stuff out, guys, because you have fake America firsters driving you in a very bad direction.
Very hard. They got hit about as hard as you're going to get hit. And there's more to come, a lot more. And when asked if the U.S. participated in the attack in any way, the president interestingly said, I don't want to comment on that.
It's so stupid. And you could argue that's because he doesn't, maybe he didn't. And he's caught off guard. I mean, that's certainly possible. He's trying to cover up that he got played. But don't you think that if they did this without them knowing, that Trump would call them out for that? That he got played and used? You see, because if let's just say that was the case, it's more important to Trump to hide that he was the victim than to be honest with you about what's going on. But again, I don't think that's the reality. I think he was involved from day one, and they know that. But no comment allows you to assume whatever you want.
That is not what Marco Rubio said last night, the Secretary of State coming out very quickly and making it clear that the U.S. was not involved, saying flatly, Let me be clear, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel because, of course, Iran has warned that it will retaliate against the U.S. Now, the president this morning is set to meet with his National Security Council in the Situation Room. And this morning, he still seems to be holding out hope that somehow these nuclear talks can be salvaged, posting just a short while ago, urging Tehran to come to the table, saying Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left, adding just do it before it is too late.
Nothing.
George?
So you just once again said that if you don't negotiate, there'll be nothing left. So that's not negotiation. That's strong arming, guys. That's not even in the same ballpark. You're pointing a gun at their head, or rather, more so, you have a baseball bat to their leg, and you're saying, you keep saying no. It's gonna be more difficult for you. Why won't you negotiate with us? As they're banging them in the leg. That's what's happening right now. It's just childishly obvious. Let's stop pretending. Why can't we get past these pretenses? I can tell you: money, propaganda, influence, control, power. Same old things. Very clear. And so it's been excellent. He's on board. We gave them a chance. They didn't take it. Who buys this stuff? It's really crazy to me. Now, BRICS, again, one of these, I think these are propaganda accounts. It's not associated with BRICS in any way. It says, just in, U.S. intelligence officials are increasingly concerned that Israel may strike Iran without Washington approval. June 11th. So to make the point, to end this first segment, actually just this first part of the segment, these accounts manipulate you. That's what happens. They're about narrative control. They've been caught lying about all sorts of stuff, guys. This is telling you what they wanted you to think, just like Jones and all the rest of them. And that was that they didn't know, or they weren't aware, or they're trying to stop World War III. At very least, he's telling you now that he was involved. We do know that there is involvement. They were just trying to get you to think that if they bombed, because they knew they were going to, that the U.S. was caught off guard, because that's what they want you to think in the moment. Now we know better, but that won't change. Now, here is what Lindsey Graham and Hegg says. This is their little theater dance they did right before this, because they wanted you to have this in your mind before this took place. I mean, realize how obvious this all is. He asked them about the nuclear weapon conversation. And it's just sad that they keep pushing this. And listen to how flimsy this back and forth is.
I'm trying to get everybody to think, let's don't do what we did in the 30s. They're going to use a nuclear weapon if they get it. Are they trying to...
Do you start with this assumptive premise? Like you somehow know that. Why? The only group in the world that's ever used them on innocent people is the United States government. To act like there's a precedent there. They're the ones that have them. All these different claims, and to say that we know, that's the same idea. That's the other. That's the dehumanization. The Iranians are just gross and bad, and we know they're going to do the bad thing if we allow them to have what everyone else... It's just sad. I mean, this is inherent. This is either racism, whatever you want to call it. This is Lindsey Graham showing you that he's a disgusting person, or rather willing to do whatever Israel says for Israel's direction or money or whatever else, or make a China that makes it easier for you to absorb. He is not acting for American interests. He's using that to make you think there's a bad thing coming, and he has no idea. In fact, I don't think it matters.
Build a nuclear weapon versus a peaceful nuclear power program. They're going to use a nuclear weapon if they get it. Are they trying to build a nuclear weapon versus a peaceful nuclear power program, Mr. Secretary? Have the Iranians been trying to build a nuke?
There are plenty of indications that they have been moving their way towards something that would look a lot like a nuclear weapon.
Are you kidding me? Think about that answer. That answer means anything. Anything, even just let's just say they had a meeting about one day building that thing. That would apply to what he just said. It's just so stupid. And of course, Lindsey Graham sets it up with, exactly what he's telling you. That's not a question. He's setting the table to ask the question. This is a setup and spike. That's what they're doing. It's shockingly stupid. And overall, the evidence we already have been talking about, which they both know, shows you the opposite is true. As Michael Tracy points out, the 2025 annual threat assessment of the U.S. intelligence community, quote, we continue to assess Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. I keep telling you all this. I've shown you 45 times from the State Department or the previous International Atomic Energy Agency investigations. Now, the reason I'm saying previous, I'll get to you in a second. I'll show you why in a second. There's an interesting development there. But my God, if this is all we're acting on, you think about how many people's lives are at risk, or the innocent children they just murdered in Iran, which I'll show you. It's the image we use today because of that. Because Israel is clearly puppeteering people like Lindsey Graham. That's my opinion, but I think it's quite frankly obvious. And here's what Tom Cotton had to say after that little exchange. He says, look at that. And even, this is so embarrassing for these people. Even Twitter is fact-checking them. I didn't see this till just now. He says, this is Tom Cotton, clearly a Zionist influence funded to the teeth by AIPAC. He says, today, Hegseth confirmed that Iran's terrorist regime is actively working towards a nuclear weapon for the sake of national security, the security of our allies, and millions of civilians, except the ones that you just murdered, right? This cannot be allowed. And it says right there, Hegseth did not say this. I mean, here, I'll read it to you again. We continue to assess Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, says the U.S. intelligence community. And here's what Aaron Mate said. Hegseth did not confirm that. He made the nonsensical claim that Iran is, quote, moving their way towards something that would look a lot like a nuclear weapon. What in the hell does that mean? And he goes, what does it mean to look a lot like a nuclear weapon? It means nothing. Hegseth said that to offer the fodder for warmongers at a time when U.S. Intel's actual assessment per the DNI is exactly what we just told you. No, continue to assess no nuclear weapon. Now, that doesn't mean we should question that like everything else. The point is there's no evidence to prove what they're saying. And yet they've been saying it for 50 years. A little less than that, I think. Yeah, Netanyahu's, this is just from 92 forward, and it's been before that. The United States of Israel account, it says Netanyahu's Iran nuclear bomb claims timeline since 1992. I mean, really take a second and absorb this, guys. From 1992, Iran is 3 to 5 years away from nuclear capability. 1993, Iran's pursuing nuclear weapons close to capability. 1995, Iran is 3 to 5 years away. Same thing. 1996, Iran's nuclear acquisition could be catastrophic. Deadline extremely close. 1996. 2003, Iran's nuclear program is a global threat. 2004, Iran's aggressively pursuing nuclear weapons. 2005, Iran's nuclear ambitions must be stopped. On and on and on. And you have to understand, most of these examples, there wasn't some action taking. There wasn't an invasion. There wasn't some kind of suppressive action taken to stop their growth. They just say these things, and then the time passes, and nothing happens. I mean, it's and I have to understand, guys, they've been caught even by the International Atomic Energy Agency of the past. And don't forget, I'm of the mind that Amano, the Japanese director before, was killed. That's my personal opinion based on the facts around the idea that he got some rapid turbo cancer. And there was indication that he thought they were going to kill him anyway. The point is he was being pressured to say what they wanted. The evidence continued to show you that they were not. And the point being, where was I going with that? I was saying something else. I've lost it. But so the point is on and on, they continue to do this. Year after year after year, continue to say it. Like I said, there was no action taken. They just didn't do so. And yet they keep pushing this idea. They continue to hype this. Every year, Iran could produce it within a year. That's 2008. 2013, Iran continued a nuclear program. 2021, Iran closer than ever to nuclear weapons. I mean, just think about how embarrassing this is. And yet it continues. How many times? Oh, that was what I was going to say, is the International Atomic Energy Agency and others have called Netanyahu out for publicly faking information. Whether that bomb graph he used, like the coyote with the red pen, or that wall of CD-ROMs he put up that turned out was all old information that wasn't even relevant to what he was saying. This was all exposed. It doesn't matter, though, because it gets the moron like Lindsey Graham screaming whatever they want them to. Now, Abby Martin says, because you realize they claim at the very least to kill some of their leadership, but they've been murdering Iranian scientists for a really long time, and no one seems to care. Regardless of whether they are seeking nuclear weapons, that's still a dramatically large war crime. It just never matters. Israel has assassinated scientists in Iran for years, she writes, while media justified it by lying about their nuclear program, which I argue still wouldn't change the legal reality of executing a scientist. Without a declaration of war, I mean, it's just so transparent how dishonest all this is. And she says, U.S. Israel are the nuclear armed aggressors trying to provoke war. Iran has the right to defend itself, but has shown enormous restraint so far, which is, you could look for yourself. Whatever horrors ensue, the United States is to blame for holding the world hostage and plunging us into the abyss. I agree. Now, Max Blumenthal points out, just days after Iran accused, and we pointed to this before, accused the International Atomic Energy Agency of furnishing the identities of high-level nuclear scientists to Israel. Think about this. Days before this, Iran was saying they just gave our information of our scientists and overlapping points about their the civilian nuclear discussion to Israel. Now, again, I say it like that because that's what the facts show, but you could argue it's more than that. That's not the point, though. It's the point about whether they were giving this information through an international channel that's supposed to be the independent mediator or the independent investigator that relayed information that then got them killed, if you believe what they're reporting, which then needs to backwardly show you that they're not independent. They are not investigating legitimately. So the point is, they are lying to you, and it's a larger construct. And that's the point in the beginning about Israel influencing all of these things. And it says, I'll say it again, just days after Iran has accused the IAEA of furnishing the identities of high-level nuclear scientists to Israel intelligence, and after leaking documents showing secret coordination between Israeli officials and the IAEA director. More assassinations. Nuclear scientists. Now, this is being reported. Mohammed Mehdi Tarani and that's last name Abbasi were assassinated in these attacks. That's the reporting anyway. These are scientists, guys. You could argue that they're inherently evil because they're Iranian and they're working on something the U.S. doesn't like, but that'd be pretty dumb to say, seeing as how that's just a lens being put over. I mean, these are people with families and jobs and dreams. And I mean, the idea that we just make them evil villains, sort of like the immigration conversation, because that suits a need, is quite disgusting. Now, the Cradle points this out. These are the leaked documents from before. This came out. This was on the 12th. Leaked documents released by Iranian media reportedly reveal that the IAEA chief has been fully coordinating with Israel and carrying out its directives. Surprise, surprise. Why they get people out of the way that don't toe the line. It says these files are part of a sensitive intelligence cache that Iran seized from Israel. Now, let's talk about this. So this was kind of this is an important part about the Trump statements and the way that it's, kind of overlapping two different things with this and the immigration point. It does look like we're going to have some time to get to that. I'm just making sure I'm not going to have to change the title. But so this is Matt Gaetz saying Trump so clearly wants peace. I simply said this government is so clearly controlled. And he posted on Truth Social, I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. Which again, the idea that so if you're being forced to make a deal or they're going to bomb you, then you're not negotiating. Now it says, I told them in the strongest words to just do it. What does that even mean? But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just wouldn't get it done. I don't understand if you can, if your mind is that they have to do what they're told, then you can acknowledge yourself, this is not a negotiation. If they are allowed to push back and say, if you understand the way this is going from day one, and actually I'll show you that right now since we mentioned earlier, or was that some weird points we're going to get to, this Witkoff point, as Patrick says, it's now clear. We were lied to. Steve Witkoff was not meant to be a peace envoy. He's been embedded in by the Israelis to order the sabotage and any personal in order to sabotage any peaceful resolution and create a fiat accompli that steers the U.S. directly into a war with Iran on behalf of Israel. And you can listen to it. It's about 4 minutes long. Steve Witkoff declares a nuclear Iran is an existential threat. See how this plays out, guys? From the 11th, right before. This is the guy supposed to be negotiating a deal. I mean, it's just Israel is infiltrating this government, all these apparatuses out there to manipulate these outcomes. And he comes out and says, they just wouldn't get it done. No, they recognize you guys were strong-arming them and they wouldn't be forced into a deal, whatever you think about them. But it goes on to say, I told them it would be much worse than anything they know. See? So you threatened them. If you don't do what we want, then we will do things worse. Silly. And it says that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world. Threats. And it says, and that Israel has a lot of it. Obvious. With much more to come, and they know how to use it. Certainly, Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead now, he says. This is on the 13th. He says, what happened? They are all dead now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with this next already planned attacks being even more brutal to come to an end. Guys, he's openly telling you more bombings of innocent people in this country, or if you want to pretend it was all nuclear scientists, illegal attacks. There's no war declared. There's no evidence of what they're claiming. He's saying we will continue to destroy your country unless you make a deal. I mean, we can't be this silly. We can't be this childish. It's obvious what this is. And as Dave DeCamp rightly points out, as I suspected, Trump didn't get dragged into anything. That was the narrative. And he goes, he should be impeached. I mean, look, I agree, but let's not pretend like it's unique now. Biden should have been impeached. So did, I mean, they're all war criminals. 100 ways over, they're showing you they don't care about the things that are foundational to this country. Now, same post, I gave Iran chance after chance. Dan Cohen says, instead of blaming Israel for attacking amid U.S.-Iran negotiations, Trump blames Iran. I mean, really take a second objectively and think about that. They're in the middle of negotiating. Israel bombs them, and Trump sides with Israel. How does that not show you everything you need to see? The reasonable explanation is that the talks were intended to create doubt in Tehran and provide cover for Israel to attack. Not the first time, by the way. The Trump administration is chock full of swindlers, double talkers, and neocons and cannot be trusted. And it's not just now. Remember during the Yemen discussion, both Biden and Trump, over and over, they were trying to tell you that there was deals being made and Saudis and the Houthis need to make deals. And every time the Houthis stopped, Saudis would rush in and take more territory. That happened like 3 times as far as I can remember. And then the U.S. would say the Houthis broke the deal. It's just like you're seeing in Gaza, just like you're seeing here. These are not honest people. He goes, it lied to Hamas to secure Eden Alexander's release. It continues to arm Ukraine while blaming Russia. Iran's survival is at stake. There can be no doubt about the U.S. and Israel's goal of the neo-colonial subjugation of Iran and genocide, like in Gaza and Syria. Russia and China must take note and act accordingly. And Witkoff, obviously being a part of this. Michael Tracy points out to that same post, pundits and influencers last night. Israel's made a mockery of the USA. This is the embarrassing nature of corporate and mainstream alternative media. This is deliberate sabotage of Trump. Netanyahu must pay. Jones and all the rest, all of them. Trump within hours takes credit for the war. Trump can always be relied upon to swiftly humiliate his most deluded and sycophant boosters. Not unique to partisanship. Now, I want to play this as well. Very, very interesting where this goes. Before we play that, actually, I'll come back to that. Actually, I'll play it after here. I want to play a clip that I think is important to add to this, which you guys have probably seen a million times over. But so I'll play these clips for you. This is an important overlap to all this. You could argue this could be its own show in a different context, but because it's on the back of Iran and Israel, I think it's worth our time to consider. As Rabble Rouser points out, deepfake technology does one thing we are not thinking about: written history. He says, how are people in 5 years going to discern that the video I'm about to show you is fake? While in the current moment, these digital, quote, jokes are being sent and reposted and liked and to millions of followers in an instant without scrutiny. Now, in no way am I saying they should be censoring because of this. That's probably how this works. Probably using this dangerous thing to justify censoring what they claim are deepfakes, which then just become the new hate speech or whatever it is to justify censoring who they don't want or don't like. But this Maverick Alexander account is spreading things that are, I notice them because I'm looking for it, but I don't know whether I would have noticed these were fake if I hadn't seen it. Here's the first one. And even now they are saying, at least in this one, that it is fake. It's AI. But he goes, Trump just unlocked a new category of unfiltered. Feels like 2016 on steroids. No indication that this was fake, except now that it's being checked. Here's what he says. Now watch this, guys, and consider the implications for what this means for media and where it goes. As his point. What happens in 10 years from now when this is circulating and has been shared by people like Alex Jones, and you look back and you're going, whoa, they'll be, like we said, what becomes truth when they will regardless say that's true? And if you show them it's fake, they go, no, that was the media lie to cover it up. Truth is whatever they decide it is. And that's the kind of post-truth world. Talking about Bilderberg, by the way, make sure you're checking out Dan Dix and his work in there. I'm hoping to interview him about his catching people like Peter Thiel, even though everyone online shared it, taking credit for Dan's work. And it's so crazy how today works. But check out his work. He's doing good work in covering what's going on at Bilderberg. My point, though, is that very clearly the post-truth world was an old talking point for these meetings. I think this has been going on a long time, and I think they've probably already changed things in whatever you want to call the, Library of Alexandria, the digital version of this that we don't even know. Like things that we all actually think are real, that we all have collected and looked at are fake. I believe we're already there. But check this out.
Don't rape themselves, as far as I understand. Somebody's doing the raping. But we're currently in the middle of a national crime wave. 29 million illegals in the past 4 years is 29 million felonies. Certain parties have benefited from these crimes from a financial standpoint, which means we have grounds for the largest RICO case in American history. RICO case. That's what it's called. There is a criminal organization working within our government as well as the private sector that makes the RICO pursuits against the mob look like child's play. I've got 2 words for anyone who's been mucking up the country on purpose: death penalty.
Now it says this at the end, okay? But people have cut that out, and this is circulating. and it's being shared. I mean, that's really hard to tell the difference. And this is my point, guys. This stuff, people can download apps for basically nothing that do things that are damn near hard to tell. And that's just average. Imagine what the military and what the U.S. government is doing, what other governments, what Israel's doing. It's probably way beyond what we can even imagine. That's really hard to tell. Here's another one. Now, this one doesn't have any notation on it, right? Now, at the same point, but this one doesn't have anything beneath it. People are looking at this and thinking this is real. And it says Trump finally breaks his silence on Israel and Iran.
Should skip it. I don't know. I'm just not really feeling it. World War III, folks. Hard pass. We've got enough going on stateside. We've got the No Kings riots set to kick off this weekend. No kings. We like kings, actually, folks. We like one king in particular, quite frankly. The King of Kings, our Lord and Savior. I don't know. Maybe you've heard of him. With that being said, God bless, good night, and good luck. I think
same point. You'll find these things circulating with that not on it. I think that's pretty concerning. Now, we're going to come back to that as, we'll have more conversations about the AI overlap and all that. I'm going to touch it pointedly at the end if I have time, but more in depth. But that's pretty insane. And again, remember, that's some guy with an app, not what the U.S. intelligence is actually producing. Now, I'll include this kind of ongoing thread from New York Times about what's going on. Israel strikes targeted. And one of the points I just wanted to show you, I believe it was down here, unless it's up, actually. This is really just for you to read through, is Trump warns Iran to reach a nuclear deal before there's nothing left. Same point. I already read that. Actually, I included it in the post, but just recognizing how obvious that is. And I'll include this in general for you. The point is Iran reels from Israeli strikes on nuclear sites and top officials, but we'll wait for more follow-up because right now, as you well know, the independent, rather the mainstream alternative media and the corporate media seem to just blindly regurgitate what Israel says and will act like we have to verify, which we should verify all things of only what one side puts forward. My point is that these platforms will just post what they say, usually without even adding just Israel says. So keep that in mind as this develops forward. Here is what the Press TV platform posted. And it's just to consider from what, you could argue the more Iranian platform is saying. Israeli terrorism against Iran's military commanders, scientists bears Western hallmarks. So right there, you can argue that at least this platform is also pointing to the people that were killed. But it says the genocidal Israeli regime launched an all-out war on the Islamic Republic of Iran on Friday, June 13th. In brazen contravention of international law, which is the case, regardless of if everything they say is true, that would still be a crime. Ask anyone who's actually nonpartisan and honest about the legal realities of international law and U.S. law, by the way, or rather in the context of the U.S. being involved, but I guess that's not because that's in dispute, leave that aside. But it says, amid the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and it says, it bombed Iran's nuclear civilian infrastructure and assassinated some veteran nuclear scientists, as well as high-ranking military commanders in indiscriminate attacks. Western countries have again refused to condemn these unlawful and barbaric actions by the Israeli regime, led by a war criminal Netanyahu, who claims to be launching this war on behalf of the civilized West against barbaric Muslims. Sounds like Laura Loomer talking right there. It says the reaction of Western countries indicates that they have no commitment to international law. You know this, or any concern for the lives of Muslims from Palestine to Iran to Yemen. The bottom line, too, is that when you the international law point, Israel has made it clear directly from the Knesset more than once that they don't believe the international law binds them. They believe they can legislate anywhere in the world. It's a direct quote from what they said in front of, this was publicly discussed. It became an international point for a moment, but it gets put aside for the same reason people ignore it today. The point is they made it clear. We can do what we want wherever we want, whenever we want. And they tripled down on that. That's why it's just so crazy for people like us to try to get this in front of people, and yet there's some weird reason it doesn't ever really get in the conversation. But you know why. It says they urge Iran to show restraint, but refuse to call out the unlawful actions of the Israeli regime. And that's just the New York Times article right there. Iran vows to retaliate as Israel strikes nuclear sites. So Iran has, at least what we can see, has already begun. So let's give you some of these points. Robert reporting yesterday, Israeli airstrikes on Tehran reportedly killed a large number of civilians. Here is an alleged image of one of the first little Iranian children murdered, still waiting for an official death toll. Here is a clip from Breaking Points, and this is in regard to the civilian death toll. Israel's unprovoked attack on Iran targeted civilians sleeping in their apartment buildings with their families, according to these reports. They killed children. By any standard, this was an act of terrorism and a clear violation of international law. Now, The fact that anybody could push back on that being possible while you're literally watching them just execute children in real time in multiple other locations shows you the dishonesty of this whole conversation. But this is what's happening. Now, whether you think they got the scientists and everything else, this was a massive attack that killed innocent people. There's real-time social media evidence coming out. There's people that are on the ground investigating. No question at all, right? But what we have in front of us very clearly shows you that's part of this.
But I think also there's something very important here to mention. We've seen that they've been targeting apartment buildings, similar to what they have done in Beirut, what they have done, of course, in Gaza in a much, much larger scale. What we've seen is that over the course of the last 2 years, but also before that, the Israelis have run a campaign to essentially eliminate all of the norms around the use of force that have been developed over time, but particularly after the Second World War, to eliminate all international law. Because what they're doing here is that they're going after civilians and military officials, but they're doing so not on the battlefield, they're not doing so in the barracks, they're doing it in their homes when they're asleep together with their children and families, as well as scores of other families in the same apartment building. If any other country were to do this against the United States, meaning that they would target even military officials, but outside of the battlefield, outside of the barracks, but at their homes together with their families, the United States would rightfully call that acts of terrorism. But this is what Israel has normalized. And I think, again, the Iranians may have underestimated how far the Israelis were willing to go to break all kinds of norms when it comes to warfare.
Which, I mean, again, it's so verifiable, it's painful. Here's another example. And this is about the confirmation point. As this is Saeed Mohammed Randi. When asked, when you talk about Israelis, there's no need for all these confirmations. But when it's Palestinians or Iranians or Lebanese, everything has to be confirmed. And by the time they're confirmed, it's all over. And that's not to suggest we should not be confirming these things. The point is to show you how blindly they will report whatever Israel says. And then when it's the other side around, or when it's not Israel, the point is that clearly they will act like they need confirmation, but then never really follow up, like Matt Miller did for the entire time he was in that position, acting like they have to follow up. We'll get back to you. And they just never do because he knows. And now he's acting like somehow he was bound by being ordered to lie. He's admitting that he didn't agree and he lied. It's just, we knew that. We know it now. So that's my point about most people knowing where we are. And we're led by a bunch of screaming partisans that lie, that they highlight as the conversation. Here's what he had to say.
On the civilian casualties, it's true that Iran state media is reporting civilian casualties. We've not had confirmation of that at present. In the meantime, Israel has said that it's struck nuclear targets.
Since you haven't confirmed it, anyone who's watching your program can go to my Twitter account and see an image of a child who was murdered and lying dead. I don't think when you want to speak on behalf of the Israelis, there's no need for all these confirmations, but when it's Palestinians or Iranians or Lebanese, everything has to be confirmed, and by the time they're confirmed, it's all over.
Yep, pretty consistently. Now, I'll include this for you. Mondawai's justifying land grab, Israel says it is allowed to ignore international law anywhere it wants. And it's in the context of the West Bank, but they make a very clear argument that, look, if we can do this anywhere else, why couldn't we take the West Bank? And they're very clearly arguing that they are allowed to do what they want wherever they want in the Knesset, like that's in Congress, guys. And look, this, despite where, people go, oh, they're going to lie. It's this platform. This is a great platform, by the way. The point is it's directly cited to literal documents from the Knesset. Like you can click all of these and they directly cite from the Knesset legislation. Let me see if this is the one. I don't think that's it. It's all the links are in here. It's right. We went through all this in a previous show. It's directly from their own documents. And it's very clear. This became a big point for a while, but it doesn't matter. It's insane to watch how obvious it is that they think they can do. And then we debate whether they're infiltrating countries when this is the kind of things they say out loud. Now, Low-Key points out, now this is discussing the people that were killed, children. Today, we received the bodies of children aged 4, 5, and 6 years old. That's reports in Iran from after the bombings. And Low-Key simply says, Israel now adds Iranian children to the long list of children killed. Fair point. Now, of course, right when this took place, this was on the 11th, or technically right before, Loomer was immediately jumping in with fake Israeli talking points. Nothing new. Massive cyber attacks across the Middle East have started. Iran is attacking Kuwait and Jordan. Okay, so think about this. Before, before this happens, this is what she's putting out, and it turns out to be fake. Nope, they're stable. Didn't happen. Okay, so ask yourself why this very obvious Zionist manipulator is out there screaming that Iran's doing evil, bad things before they attack Iran. Do I need to connect those dots? I think it's pretty obvious. There's a lot of this going on out there. And of course, here she is, June 13th. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. Nothing new. How is it not America first to congratulate those who just made sure Islamists who chant death to America and openly plotted to assassinate Donald Trump, oh, they were still pushing that lie, apparently, never opportunity to have a nuke. So the idea that they were ever going to go after Trump was completely broke. That was a complete facade. Like, that was very clumsy. We broke it down last time. And of course, Jones and the rest were all pushing the same thing, just like they're pushing everything now, whatever used in the moment. But to argue that bombing innocent people or whatever, scientists in any context, regardless of whether you have a legal right to, is okay because they say certain things. I thought you believed in free speech, Laura Loomer. We see it's only insofar as we can use it for our agenda. These racist, disgusting, vile people will use what you care about against you to force in what they want everywhere you look. America first, right? To start a war with a foreign country that's against American interests that most Americans don't want. Maybe you should rethink what you think America first actually means, Laura. Now, Khamenei, as we pointed to earlier, this on the 12th, this is the leader of, in Iran. With this crime, the Zionist regime has prepared for itself a bitter, painful fate, which it will definitely see. Now, that doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. That's just, political rhetoric. But historically, Iran not immediately does follow through with what they claim. Now, Mencho Sin points out that this is today, about the middle of the day, the Iranian armed forces announced they successfully downed an Israeli fighter jet. Now, that does seem to be the case. There's been follow-up reports about a pilot being taken. Realize that right now there's probably more going on, so if you got anything important you're seeing, put it in the chat, and I'll try to include it. Iran claims to have downed the jet and have actually captured a pilot. This is all breaking right when I was going live. Insider Paper points out the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, radioactive. Realize it's so funny how people are so. Even read the comments. But I thought they didn't have any nuclear. It's like you don't understand the reality. They have nuclear. At least they claim it's only a civilian program. The evidence backs that up. But people point to this to suggest that, they're admitting they've got nuclear weapons. People are just so ignorant of the topic. But it says radioactive leak detected inside their nuclear facility. Well, gee, you think that might have something to do with the bombing that just took place? The ones that are acting like they're saving us all from this when they literally just, they're trying to create chaos. Remember with all the hype about Ukraine and the nuclear facility there that Russia was bombing, and then the moment that Russia took control, the Ukraine turned around and started bombing it? It's just so obvious how they're being played in every possible facet. U.S. now moved their ships closer to Israel, right? Because this is yet again Israel's war that the U.S. government is fighting. Live updates, Israel hit by missiles as Iran retaliates for strikes on nuclear sites. I'm just including these so this will develop as the day goes on. This is what was going on right before I went live. Robert reports today, Iranian ballistic missile counter attack on Israel now, reports over 150 missiles fired. And here is a picture of Tel Aviv. Robert reports, Iranian ballistic missiles impact central Tel Aviv, blew through the air defenses on live TV. That's my point. What happened to the Iron Dome, guys? Especially as Trump is now pushing this idea that we want to get a Golden Dome. I mean, we're being played in its spectacular ways. This is probably more Israeli infiltration. There's probably some AI Palantir manipulation. Overall, if you're going to emulate what they're doing, then we're being played. That's pretty simple. Robert and I have talked about this a lot. But that aside, he says likely hit intelligence and military buildings, but they did hit Tel Aviv, right? Which they're already spinning into some massive terrorist attack and they're bombing civilians. But don't forget, as Glenn points out today, Israel in 2021 built its new IDF. No, that's important. They had a location, but they built their new location in the context of all that's going on. The IDF Supreme Command Post in the heart of Tel Aviv, buried beneath blocks of civilian buildings. That's very easy to prove. It's right there in the New York Times. You can read it. He says, called the Fortress of Zion. It was deliberately placed so it couldn't be attacked without seeming to target civilian sites. That's how this government works. Axios reports that U.S. forces are involved in currently repelling Iranian attacks on Israel, which we already heard in other reports, but that's the case. They're immersed in this, putting U.S. personnel at risk for Israel's belligerence. And of course, in the meantime, the overlap with Syria, Netanyahu thanks Jolani and al-Qaeda as they're casually refueling their bombing planes over Syria. All right, as he says, thanks, Jolani and Al-Qaeda. So you're literally working with the worst of the people in the world to go after, it just shows you they are, like, if you want to get into the whole axis of the, what is the axis, good guy, bad guy dynamic. If you can't recognize right now what Jolani is in Syria, what the moderate rebels are, what the people they're supporting anywhere are the worst, or, funding different groups to overthrow or divide people wherever they can. These people are not honest. I always think it's funny that it shows you that I'm not following these people, but I am. There's part of that. I'm telling you, there's so much manipulation on this platform. But again, the Iron Dome, this is anti-war reports, a quote, shield against nuclear attacks makes nuclear war more likely. Now, the logic is actually sound. Read it for yourself. It's just, the point is, this is driving us in the direction they want to achieve, in my opinion. Now, let me play this clip because you probably remember. All right, you've seen this before. It's very important to remember this is what they've been doing, not in a partisan way, whatever current administration. This is Patrick Clausen from the Washington Institute for Near East Policy talking about how they can manufacture a war with Iran. And this has been going on a very long time. And the part that's important is not just that it is manufacturing this war, but the idea of how they get there and how this is always how wars start. And this is what so many of us have been pointing out for such a long time.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack.
Now, think about this in both contexts, right? This overlaps to both. To what they're doing with Iran and manufacturing consent, regime change, psychological operations, as well as what they need to drive you into conversation, through the Los Angeles discussion, through the PSYOP therein, and the riots and the protests and the U.S. manipulation through it, the arming, the funding, the whatever else we're talking about, right? This is both. How do we get you where we need you? That's how all this works out.
So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
Ah, yes, somebody else.
But I would just like to suggest that one can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why?
This is the blithe discussion of people like this in their little in their corner rooms talking about how they're going to manipulate people's lives and laughing about it. And how every war in the past has been started by a manufactured false flag event. That's what he just said. Now, you can argue he's wrong, but this is the mindset of people behind the scenes. And this has been influenced by Israel as far back as you want to look to Israel's existence.
We can do
I shouldn't say that, but since they've been influential, let's put it that way.
A variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that.
Yeah, you are.
But I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition. Of, it's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.
Yeah, I'd love to see an example of where you show me Iran carrying out a psychological operation against the United States. There's lots of narratives, but funny how it always turns out that that's not really the case, or that you can see that they're the ones pulling the strings. Or, I mean, I'm not even saying, I argue it's probably unlikely that there's not something you could find, but just take note of how hard that is to overlap when you got 100 examples in a row from administration to administration through Israel that they've been doing this for a very long time. Now, some points to overlap that on the way out of this segment. As Pelham points out, Iran isn't bombing hospitals. Iran isn't bombing refugee camps. Iran isn't killing UN workers. Iran has not killed 50,000 Israeli children. Iran isn't bombing schools. Iran isn't bombing nuclear facilities. Israel is a terrorist state. Kind of hard to disagree with that logic, guys. Alan McLeod, as I pointed to earlier, says none of this would be happening if Iran really did have nuclear weapons. It's an excellent point. It's not that he's advocating for that. He's just making an obvious point that shows you the broken logic of this whole thing. Caitlin Johnstone bumps up against what we see every time, whether bots or just dumb people, right? She's making a point. Says, very shocked and outraged by Iran's upcoming, completely unprovoked anti-Semitic attack on Israel. It's perfect. It's exactly, I mean, she's just making an obvious point that's what, regardless of whether they have a right to, that's how liars and manipulators and partisans are going to try to frame it. Michael says, now you're simping for the mullahs? And she discusses every effing time. Empire simps don't understand the concept of opposing the empire's warmongering on principle. Principles, the word they seem to have lost. So in their mind, I just coincidentally happen to be madly in love with every single official bad guy regime that the imperial war machine targets. This is perfect. You know, the idea being, sure, maybe that's the case, but you have to understand that just because people, like, it's also possible that you don't blindly support Iran, but you recognize, or at least it's your opinion, that they're doing something wrong on this side. But again, I think most of these are manipulators and bots, but some people do think, oh, you must just be paid by Russia or whatever. And what's funny is they're doing, like when you guys were laughing at the left for saying everything was Russia, well, guess what? You're the same thing right now. And that's how this goes with partisanship, and that's not the majority, in my opinion. But of course, Lindsey Graham and the rest of the controlled, government, he comes out and says, game on, pray for Israel. Game on. God, this guy's a monster, man. Like legitimately, like this is one of the grossest people in the congressional situation. And by the way, though, recognize that it's pretty obvious. This, you can zoom in on this across the board, guys. Things like this happen, and they can't jump on their phone fast enough to go, I support Israel. I stand with Israel. Every single one of them, except for the few you might expect. I mean, just look. On and on. And it's not just the United States, which is my larger point. What does that show you? And Simon Godek says, Dr. Simon Godek says, Israel attacks Iran. Normal Americans, what the F? Politicians, we stand with Israel. Every statement reads like it came straight from AIPAC headquarters. In case you were wondering, yes, we're living in an occupied country. And that should not even be contentious to point out anymore. It's not about Jewish people, other than the overlap there with Jewish people or with Christians or with Muslims or with atheists, which all apply to Zionism. Yes, very clearly in Israel, the Jewish supremacy that their B'Tselem human rights group will call out does play a factor. The point, as we started with in the beginning, is that is Zionism's manipulation through Judaism that a lot of Jewish people are calling out. And since I actually mentioned him in the beginning, I'll include the interview with Dan Cohen about this topic. The manipulated or manufactured Middle East plights and the Zionism linchpin. They're all over, guys. Orthodox Jewish communities that are saying Zionism does not represent us, and you have to acknowledge that part of the story. And I think it's a vastly growing number. Now, to end on this point of the overlap, all right, what's going on in Los Angeles, the immigration discussion, just to make I'm of the mind that this is being driven through this discussion. Now, that doesn't have to be that just it's only Israel dictating the outcome. I do believe that's very likely, but nonetheless, the point is about the interest they all have. And right now, it's a stated interest of some of these biblical Zionists to see the West collapse to bring on the end times. Now, I said I'm not crazy, I see that to be wildly outside the realm of possibility in the context of where we are right now. Nonetheless, they do not think that's crazy. They believe that's where this goes. And so the point is, if you are a U.S. politician who believe in Zionism and you have biblical Zionists in the leadership of that state of Israel saying that this state has to be destroyed for what they want to achieve, and people like Besant and Hegseth and the rest are like, yay, Zionism. How can you possibly be America first? Now, on top of that, recognize that the immigration conversation is a major driving force that we've already seen Israel. There's overlaps of weaponized migration all over the place from Israel and their policy, which drive these things on and on and on. Now, those are worth just pointing out. Now, from the focal point of this conversation, it's important to recognize that what's happening, I argue, whether it's the Palantir surveillance state or just the cracking down of American rights. There's 100 different things that the Republicans in other contexts are so quick to call out that you can see being used through this. And I talked about this on June 10th. Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act was declared unlawful, and the LA's orchestrated chaos and Israel's propaganda around this as well. The orchestrated nature of this, I argue, is very clear. My point is that's almost always the case. And if you are blinded by the partisan game, or rather just if you see it as the left doing it to the right, I think you're wrong. Put it that way. Question everything. Consider that I'm wrong. I think it's obvious that this does not even remotely line up with what you claim the left is trying to accomplish. How do you explain to me that they're trying to push in illegal immigration because they need votes or whatever the logic is, and then they manufacture an event that gives the justification for why they shouldn't allow immigrants in the country? Yeah, I mean, if your answer is, oh, they're just so stupid, they didn't think it through. It's like saying Assad just likes to kill children. Yeah, it works because there's nothing else. And there's no logic to it. It's just, you can say those words out loud. The facts don't back it up, but that's what that's the game, guys. And in this case, it's very clear that from my perspective, this is the justification to achieve the Great Reset, the Build Back Better, Big Beautiful Bill, whatever you want to call it. It's very clear that this is being used to achieve what both parties want, or rather just your government. So keeping all that in mind, we also talked about the Posse Comitatus Act, and I'm going to follow up with an important point about this. This was on the 8th of June. And remember, actually, I'll grab that if it comes up. Yeah, there it is. Just so you can read it for yourself. This is the actual Posse Comitatus Act, the verbiage telling you that whoever, except under circumstances authorized by Constitution or by act of Congress, there's only two, whether it's an actual invasion or rebellion, or under the Insurrection Act, for example. Those are the two different things. And I'll get to, that's why, in my opinion, you have the Joneses of the world pushing the idea that this is an actual invasion, an insurrection, or whichever one works in the moment. Both are being thrown out at different times, even though they're very different things, because that gives them the legal right in their mind to ignore this act. As what I'm going to show you next is that not only has the National Guard been used and federalized, which now also makes that part of it, but that they have deputized these people and the Marines deployed. They're enforcing the law. It's all on record. You can see them doing so. So if they're doing anything but advising them, then that's a direct textbook violation of this act. All it stands for is a posse of people to enforce the law. So the point is, as a sheriff, for example, you can't just go round up people and go and enforce the law as you see it. Or rather, the president. You can't. The point is, you have to do this through otherwise they could just basically form their own army. You see where this goes. This is a legal reality. And so what I'm going to show you, include that before I forget. Here is Melnick pointing out what ICE posted themselves, which says photos from today's ICE Los Angeles immigration enforcement operation. And you can see them involved. Now, you have to understand, if they're advising, that's very different than being involved with, having shields and pushing back against protests. You are there enforcing. There's going to be some nuance, or rather, I shouldn't call it nuance, but some clumsy partisan argument to try to make sense of sort of like the game they're playing with Garcia. It's not working. And there's only very dumb people are falling for whatever they're trying to push right there, but it doesn't mean it's not going to work because they're in control. But in this case, the point is people arguing that they're not enforcing it, some kind of sidestep. But he says ICE confirms that they are using California National Guard troops deputized over the objection of the state's governor to support ICE arrest operations. Now, and on top of that, they're also federalized. It's not a state's discussion. They superseded Gavin Newsom, who I agree is a monster, to make this happen, which then additionally adds another layer to this. But it says, remember when people freaked out over Jade Helm and thought Biden was going to deploy troops? Crickets from those folks. He's right. My point, I said, so they are enforcing the law, as we already knew. Some just pretend otherwise. Therefore, because they were deployed under federal authority, this is a textbook example of the violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. And the point, it's right here. In case it makes any more difference to you that Grok says it, I think that's important for certain conversations because of people that blind themselves to certain mediums. Because you can read it directly from the act. I just showed you. But here's what Grok will add to it. If the National Guard's deployed domestically and is enforcing the law on the ground, is it a violation? And it says, generally prohibits the use of federal military forces. That's why it matters, because once they were federalized and not deployed by the state, they become federal military forces, including the National Guard, when federalized, right there, to enforce domestic laws. And I simply said, was the National Guard just deployed in LA under federal authority, Title 10 by Trump? And it says, yes, according to multiple sources, Donald Trump deployed 2,000 National Guard. You know, you can read through it. It's exactly what we're talking about. The point is that this is a textbook example of a very important thing that people have been discussing for a long time. Martial law, military deployed. And now, like we said during COVID, the very people who would be most on guard about this, if it was a Democrat, are pacified because Trump's there. Or at least because they don't want to scream about it because the Cat Turds and Jones of the world are convincing them that you shouldn't because you're going to hurt the plan. Right? Kerry points out, looking like generations of military propaganda, courtesy of the government, news media, and Hollywood cultural institutions, paired with ongoing, this is an invasion of military-age males, and Trump will liberate us rhetoric, has primed lots of people to grovel for the military to police a nation whose values are supposed to oppose exactly that. P.S., she says, I'm in L.A. and I can confirm I don't need or want security theater in exchange for freedom. And this is Molly Pitcher saying, those rioter losers are in L.A. have no idea what's coming. It's just gross how obvious. They either don't understand that they're the ones destroying this country, or they do and they're working for something else. I mean, this is not America first, guys. You are literally undermining the basic things that we fought against. Here, it just says, we are coming to LA, and shows these military people talking about it. Wild. Now, here is a report that I think is important to highlight. Let me close some of these. Appeals court temporarily blocks judge's ruling to return control of National Guard to California. Now, it says the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on Thursday temporarily blocked a federal judge's order that directed Trump to return control to California. So it just shows this battle, and this is my point. So it's funny how anything that goes against them is a judicial coup and an activist judge working for politics. And then I don't disagree. I think all of them are. Doesn't mean you disregard the circumstance, the check and balance, at least as it currently stands. They're all being appointed for very clear reasons. My point is, when now you get a ruling in your direction, which is exactly the same thing, like in a very obvious way, this is a provable textbook example. But they rule to ignore it, probably because they're politically motivated. Now, I'm not going to come out and go, get rid of the judge, go circumvent them because that'd be stupid and childish. The point is, if they are wrong, then you can bring it to a higher court. The point is that this administration just doesn't care about the court rulings. They've made that very clear, or at least they largely don't care, until they really have to. But I just think it's funny how the hypocrisy, either it's a judicial coup, activist judges, or it's not. And if it's some of it, then that's not a judicial coup, is it? If it's a judicial coup, that would mean the judges, clearly the Millers of the world are just giving you what you need to react emotionally. Clearly, they don't point it out when they get a political ruling in their own favor. Now, Trump, here's some repercussions around this conversation, has come out and said tomorrow that he is going to use force against protesters. Not if they're violent. And if you want to try to pretend that he just, that's what he meant, well, you don't just get to insert words into his verbs, okay, or into his language. He, 3 times in a row here, says that if they protest, they'll be met with violence. And I'll make 2 more points after we play this. I think this is very obvious. And it goes back to the same clips we played about guns, about the internet, about the flag. The Constitution is simply something to be stepped on to these people. And if you can't see that by now, you're not paying attention.
Big on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protest that wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest, but this is people that hate our country, but they will be met with very heavy force.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so obvious points need to be made here. So first of all, 3 times he says that.
Very big force.
Big force.
By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest.
Are you kidding me? You see how silly and petty and small this is? So the protest that they've all pointed to, right? The protest is called No Kings. It's about Trump on his birthday. And that's the actual impetus for this, because they do know there's a protest, right? But because these people need to diminish it and act like, I don't even know. Is there even a protest? I don't even know. It doesn't even matter. It's all small stuff. These are children, guys. Like, that is so small. You obviously know it's a protest because you're literally talking about that protest and when they come out to protest. But I don't even know. Is there a protest? It just seems so dumb to me. And then secondarily, he goes on to make the point of the thing he doesn't know exists, that they're all anti-American. So what do you mean? Anytime anybody protests is anti-American? Or the one that you pretend you don't know is happening? It's that one that doesn't exist yet, though. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. That's embarrassing. It's just silly. And I think that's what happens when one, you're petty and your hubris runs your life, but secondarily, that you just lie about all sorts of stuff. That's not unique to left and right, Biden, Obama, and all the rest. They're all like this. But it's just very obvious through him. I just think, just for sake of those points, listen to this again and think about this.
On Saturday, we're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protest that wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest, but, this is people that hate our country, but they will be met with very heavy force.
Right. So the ones we don't know about yet are all going to hate the country because they're protesting. Or is it because they're protesting you? Right? So you are the country. Is that the point? Gosh darn it, man. It's alarming how people hear these things and then cheer. It's like, that's a scary reality of people that are that willfully ignorant, or that dishonest. Now, additionally, on the 11th, by the way, deploying military before a planned protest, not due to violence, mind you, in Texas, but simply to the claim that it could happen. Do you not see where this is going? It's as if you were protesting something against the Democrats, and they said, well, we know the right's dangerous, so we're going to stop the protest. We're going to deploy a national emergency. And you would rightly freak out about that. Now, just because you're going to, in reverse, claim that, the Democrats are evil, whatever your ridiculous, all-encompassing, broad-stroke narrative is, you are the ones undermining the Constitution. You're allowing your emotions to be used, and but the point is, people doing that probably don't even care where that. But those that see it need to call this out. Texas Governor Abbott to deploy National Guard against the state in response to protests. So here we are with emergencies being declared, military being deployed because it's Tuesday. This is getting, it's not out of control. This is clearly what they want, but it's getting, it's progressing to a point to where we need to start calling this out. And this person says, so wait till they destroy the city, right? See my point? So that's terrifying. I hope it's a bot, but if it's not, that's such an uninformed American that they are of the mind that you have to preemptively stop the crime that you expect to happen. How did we get here? Well, that's preemptive self-defense. Isn't that if I just didn't even mention that, to be honest, that's I'm surprised. Israel's claiming that. Their whole claim, I wish I would remember this at the beginning of the conversation, they're claiming it was preemptive self-defense. It's just cartoonish. It comes from the Bethlehem Doctrine that apparently only the US, the UK, and Israel use, which means they can attack who they want if their intelligence suggests that they might attack you. There's no legal reality to that, guys. That's simply you attacking and manufacturing narratives, and usually they lie about it, like Bolton and the limpet mines in Iran that turned out to be them moving their own boats in their own harbors, but that was the credible threat that led to all of that. Now we can prove that, but we don't care, right? It's just insane how clear that is. They are manufacturing it. But so same point here is we need to preemptively attack Americans because you think they're violent. You guys, you're losing the plot. And I said, admit you don't care about, same thing I said before, admit you don't care about or don't understand the Constitution without saying you don't care about or don't understand the Constitution. By your logic, the government can violate your rights if it claims you'll be violent. We can't be this stupid. Alex Jones on the 10th. So this is a building discussion, right? Now, I think this is kind of funny if it wasn't so alarming that it starts as Americans protesting ICE because they're breaking the law, which is transparently clear. And people that committed violence, some of them got held accountable for it. So good, the crime, they should be held accountable. But then the idea that they're all violent is what they did to you in the reverse. And you guys know it. Stop being a hypocrite. You can't invalidate everyone's right to protest because people were violent, especially when we know that they manufacture that violence all the time. The point is that this to come out, that from there it becomes, Americans protesting then somehow became Mexicans invading because of a flag. Just where are the great facts you guys are reporting? And then they lurch into abstract things that can add to it, but don't prove it's happening, which is the narrative becomes what we claim based on nothing. And they build on that narrative that then becomes fact. This guy literally traffics this every day. But so here's an interesting point. If you understand your history, you understand that the U.S. government basically strong-armed Mexico, despite giving some money to them, to take over all what is now the United States in regard to California and around what used to be Mexico. So that's a very clear thing to prove. And then point is, beyond that, like everything else, they did not hold up their end of the agreement. They didn't respect the people. It's what the U.S. government does, guys. Ask the Native Americans. Ask everybody they deal with. Ask the Houthis. That actually applies. Ask the Kurds. My point is, this guy comes out and makes a statement about this. I find it actually pretty interesting. He's playing the game. This is the Mexican Senate president, and he says, "Look, if you want to give us back what you took from us, and that's the image he's showing, then we'll pay for the wall, the entire thing." In no way is he going, we're going to invade and take this by force. They're trying to conflate that flimsy, unprovable narrative that they claim is happening here with this because it simply works. And the point is, he's making a point to say, we'll pay for it all if you give us back what you took from us. And then goes on to make the point about how they're treating immigrants. That's the point. Here's what Alex Jones, watch it for yourself. It's only 2.5 minutes. Alex Jones says the narco-terrorist controlled Mexican government is now publicly promoting a plan to annex the United States Southwest. That's not even remotely what he said, but you'll never get a fact check for these kind of Twitter embedded manipulators. The point, well, sometimes it does happen. The point, though, the narco-terrorist controlled, you mean like the cartels? You mean like the cartels you can literally prove Israel's embedded with, and the United States government for that matter? Guys, if you take a second to just search that, even today, with all this going on, you'll find 100 different articles, even from U.S. government adjacent information, like from the intelligence, that show that they know Israel is behind the scenes working with the cartels. Same with the U.S. government. By the way, that shouldn't be shocking to anybody that even barely pays attention to history and what's going on around the world. But see, that doesn't matter to people that are pushing a narrative in the moment. Sort of like the people that tell you the New World Order and all North American Union and everything we're watching for. Then the moment it actually starts to happen, they point somewhere else. China, everything, don't look over there, look anywhere else but Palantir. But they did this more than him because the idea was to create the illusion that Mexico's invading, even though, again, 30 seconds before that, it was Americans protesting ICE. They just will go with whatever works, guys. It's embarrassing. And here's Red State working off that very claim. It sure seems like the Mexican Senate president just called for invading the United States. Guys, it didn't. It's not even remotely what happened. You're insinuating that through the idea of what I think is a well-crafted point to say that we'll pay for the whole wall if you just give us back what was ours, and then goes on to say he's mistreating these people, which he is. To make that into we're going to take your country is just like they even could functionally do that. It's just beneath them. But Jason Bassler makes the best point. He says, let's be real. If these were the flags they were waving, the right would never have said a word. And you damn well know it, right? The guy standing on the car with an Israeli flag, the guy riding on a motorcycle around the car with an Israeli flag, and they put Palantir and MAGA and stuff. Are you really going to pretend that you think that this would have gone crazy if they were Israeli flags? We all know the answer to that. Everybody. I think that's a very well-crafted point. Now here's Alex again saying the Democrat-financed and controlled insurrection is now spreading nationwide. And they're pointing to small little examples of violence. And there are violence, and some of them get arrested for it. But as we talked about today, the vast majority of the area and the vast majority of the people involved are not spinning out into crazy violence, but there are examples of it. And that's what they're showing you. But that happens every time. And yes, even Alex will wax intellectual for hours about agent provocateurs, except when it's their narrative, right? Obviously, that's part of this, and it could be in any case. And the point is that's not even being brought up. But then, of course, the bigger point, a Democrat financed, well, you can point to these overlapping things, or really the Walmart heiress and the influence of the masks that were delivered. It's also abstract and subjective. To say that then means Walmart, which therefore means Democrats, it certainly could. But adults in the room know that's a wild, leaping assumption. The point is the government always is investing in different sides of the stoking of the problem, which achieve their ends. He would point that out if it was any other context. But so the insurrection, that's my point. Do you know why he's saying that, in my opinion? Because they need that. They need to frame this scattering of different things as an insurrection, which then will allow them in their minds to deploy the military and do whatever they want. It's the same conversation of January 6th, guys, that you rightfully called out. Now you're doing the same thing in reverse. David Icke says, here we go again, Alex Jones. The, quote, deep state is Democrats. Pathetic. The global cult operates through both sides, in quotes, and in this case, one side, in quotes, generates the extremes of protest and the other in the government responds with the military. Who benefits from this perpetual pincer movement? The cult does with its agenda and global dystopia. The left, in quotes, protests what it would have supported under Biden had the military targeted the, quote, right. And the quote right cheers on the military for targeting the quote left when it would have been furiously condemned if it was done to them. It's a conspiracy. They would have screamed, yes, it is. And now the Trump promoting MAGA hysteria through people like Alex Jones is a key part of that conspiracy and the way it plans to divide and rule America into tyranny. Those working through the puppet Trump want civil war because while they focus on the population on fighting each other, the dystopia can be slipped through unchallenged. It's not new, guys. He's even demanded to solve the quote problems the cult has systematically created through its assets on both sides. He says, children in adult bodies have always been the foundation of the human plight. How tragic it is that we have so many. Look at my books from way back. Current events are all predicted because if you are paying attention, it's also predictable. And here's another one. Derek Bros says, beware of losers trying to convince you that civil war is about to happen, which is, neither of us are trying to say that civil war is not possible. Or that maybe that they're, the overlap, like that's where this may be going. The point is that they're trying to hype anything right now. Like, I mean, again, we can't pretend that we didn't just watch Alex Jones tell you we were already in World War III. And I went through on that very show to show you how many times he's even done that before. Every month, it seems, we're in World War III. And yet here we are. And I'm the one that will make the argument of if you want to talk about metrics and the idea of what we used to say constitutes a world war, I think we've been in that for a long time, but that's not the point he's making. He's saying because of what just happened, now it's all starting. We're de facto in World War III with Russia. Not that it's always been there, right? It's just hype, guys. They're trying to manipulate you. And he says, go search Luke Rudkowski's videos to see how many times over the years he's used similar clickbait titles. Alex Jones is one of the worst as well. Do not give these people your time and money. Aaron Melnick points out, and this is about the reality of why people are protesting. Now, I'm not going to say that I think we know there are paid protesters. It's always the case, and we can prove it right now. And from all of it, I would argue. But the point is that there are people you can prove are protesting against what they feel, and I agree, are violations of the Constitution, of the government, ICE. And so people are pointing out, as Stephen Miller and the rest are making this about illegal rapists, illegal aliens, rapists, and terrorists, and, all this bombastic talking points that are not represented in what's actually happening. And this is John Favreau saying, Stephen Miller's tweets are becoming indistinguishable from a 4chan incel manifesto. Aaron Melnick says, not a single invasion in history involved people entering another country to become dishwashers or delivery drivers. Now, I can obviously point out that in asymmetrical warfare, you should at least consider that people are embedding themselves for long-term action, of course. But if you're going to do that, then you should very clearly point out the most obvious examples of what countries doing that. Either way, though, consider it, but not make it up. Facts matter. He says, but his point is simply to highlight that there's this scattering long-term discussion that they just lump into being one thing when they want it to. But he says, Miller wants you to be terrified of people who are trying to feed their families, so when he rounds them up and abuses them, you won't protest. He also points out, remember exactly according to Wall Street Journal, the precise orders that Stephen Miller gave to ICE a few weeks ago before these protests started, which was stop focusing on targeted arrests, people they know are criminals, and regular procedure, and instead just go out there and arrest illegal aliens, which by definition of the way they're framing that, meaning just people that you perceive to be. And that's what it says very clearly. Go to 7-Eleven and Home Depot. It's right there. And just scoop up people that are there. He screamed, according to many people, to the leaders of the ICE discussion, or the people that were there to trickle down his orders to ICE. And they were like, he was outraged that they didn't have more numbers. So just like Israel and the killings, they're forcing an outcome regardless of the circumstance. That's obvious. And people were outraged, rightly so. Guys, from day one, and I'm not partisan, despite what people claim. I'm critical of the left and critical of the right in equal manner, based on what's true and what we can prove. The reality is that from day one, you can easily prove that. Look at Khalil, look at Ozturk. The story is basically, well, some of them aren't over, but the facts have fleshed out in 17 different ways. They lied to you. They said bad things about Israel that you can prove are true, and they got attacked for it. My point is that this has been going on from the beginning of this whole thing. There's innocent people in El Salvador. We can literally prove the majority of the early push of 200 plus were innocent people here legally with no criminal record who are in El Salvador prisons right now. And so if you can't protest, think about people that are saying you shouldn't be able to protest for something like that. The point is These protests spun out because people were immediately recognizing, on top of what's already happened, you're pressing them to go after anybody. So they started protesting. And Miller called them all a bunch of infiltrating illegals and whatever else they framed it as. Most of them, as far as I can tell, were people that were Americans who were outraged about what was happening. And yes, this is being manipulated. Now, look, is it possible that it's just a Democrat organization who wants to destabilize? Yeah, that's certainly possible. But if all you have is evidence, like let me see the best way to frame this to make it as simple as possible, because I'm of the mind, as you guys will know, that the left-right paradigm is a game manipulating you. That's not to say that there are not people that believe those things, even in Congress. From the top down, whatever side funds this, the outcome, like David was just pointing to, is for the government, not one side of it. So it's not to say that there's not a Democrat-led effort, and maybe even in their minds, to go after Republicans alone. So I think that's the simplest way to put it. But you have to understand that the outcome serves the government control of your life, whatever side you're on. That's not my opinion. You can easily show that. The question, though, is from their minds to in what end here, and is there outside influence, right? And so this is, I mean, therefore I am. And a lot of people are just fixated on the fact that there's Democrat influence, despite the fact that you can also show other parts of influence that don't neatly fit their narrative. But I said, despite Israel getting caught paying TikTokers, as we've all seen, to push and even censor content, many are running with the contradictory narrative that it's only the Democrats, despite all of this, completely undermining the very goals that you claim they seek. I think that's a very important point. Here is a person on TikTok, which, by the way, we can't prove he's telling the truth. We also know that there are people that just come out to lie about things in the midst of chaos because they like that or think it's funny. Here's a guy saying he was paid $200 a day to protest and told to go crazy, which would not surprise me in the slightest. My point, though, is if we know Israel was caught paying TikTokers to do things, shouldn't that be the immediate consideration? But it could be anybody, as you well know. But the assumption becomes it is what we want it to be, not the all possibilities. But Catherine pointed this out early, and this is real. This is not some guy on TikTok. This is actual documentation of a Democrat entity around immigration, rather. I do stand by that. The Coalition for Human Immigrant Rights, basically funding, as it says right here, these different pushback. It's one of the key players in fomenting violent response to immigrant enforcement actions. And so the point is, through this taxpayer funding, this is what's happening. But to me, again, the outcome is what matters, but that shows you a channel through which they just use these things to drive us against each other. All I'm asking is that you consider that, because I think that's frankly obvious what's happening. But just consider that even if it's through Democrat channels, because that's what works right now, it's about trying to drive you to a certain outcome. Mike Ben's their thing over this. Like, I don't trust this guy in the slightest, but nonetheless, he's pointing out the general point. And a lot of people look at these points he makes and make it only about one side, but it doesn't apply one way. The CIA's riot guide from 1983 calls for agitators to, quote, create a martyr for the cause by leading the demonstrators into a confrontation with authorities. Right. So we're talking about, from my perspective on this, people protesting what ICE is doing, and then being like January 6th, people protesting what they thought was a stolen election. And I'm of the mind they're cheating every single time. So it's not to say that's not the case. The point is that they were there fighting for what they thought was a stolen election. And then people like Ray Epps and others drove chaos, which they got framed for. That's very obvious. So I just wish more conservatives would be honest about how that's at least possible right here. I think it's actually obviously what's happening. But what he's saying is that's what they always do, right? You're out there protesting what you think is wrong, and they come in and cause chaos, then you get blamed for it. That's what they always do, guys. So think about that. Now, this is a point James Lee put out that I think is really important to consider. There's a lot of videos flying around, and this isn't just about this one. This is about everything. Even going back to the deep fake point we just made. This is just what's it called? A filter on TikTok. I shouldn't even said that before. I should let you watch it first, but since I said it, this is not real. But people fall for this stuff because they see what they want to be happening and they fall into it. So people making videos about how they got beat up by people at these are the anti-riot, anti-ICE people that are beating me up in the street. There's a lot of those going around. But here's at least a reason to consider that they could be lying to you. Oh, I thought I added that. I don't technically need to play the full thing, but I will just since we have the time. So like I said, she is starting out in the video like I went down there to see what happened, and ultimately shows you that it's a filter. Oh, I did have it already. I guess I didn't see it. Here it is. Or I thought I did. That's frustrating. Okay. It's funny, as I'm doing this is just confounding. I was dealing with this earlier today. And sometimes I do this on the show and I can't find it, but there's something weird going on with this stuff. Like, I feel like everywhere all the time right now. I think we all know there's weird stuff like with the blackouts and what's going on, but for example, on Twitter with Robert's information, I was posting and retweeting and sharing this stuff, and it wasn't showing up on my feed at all, anywhere, until I had to caption it and share it with something I said, and then it showed up. And this is not unique. I think it's because Robert is getting a lot of traction on important things, and they don't want that to be seen. Now that I said all that, let's watch this video.
I live in LA, so I decided to go downtown today and talk to people and find out what's really going on, what's their side of the story, to only get attacked and realize that they're all full of shit, okay? Can't believe any...
Yeah, pause it right there so you can see it. See that? That's a lens. That's a filter. So all the stuff on her face is fake. That's what she's pointing out.
They're all full of shit.
I'll try to get an easy shot with it right here. There it is. See, right there. Look at that. Okay. And people are falling for this stuff. Some because they want to, right? But others because it looks real and they're not checking stuff. So people are being played. It's wag the dog style today, guys. And just to point out, Stephen Miller comes out and says, believe it or not, California used to be a paradise. Mass migration has brought us to where we are now. I simply said, you misspelled Palestine. The point is he's clearly trying to create this idea that it's all the illegal people destroying our country when the reality is what they support in every other context is exactly that. They're just hypocrites, guys. They're hypocrites. Now, speaking of hypocrites, the point we're going to end on, Stephen Miller says, if your stance is that you can only deport illegals after they violently attack a citizen, then you're saying we have no border at all, which I don't know if anybody's saying that. The whole point is that if you're here, there are fringe opinions and everything. But the reality is it's a law. You're breaking the law. So if you're here illegally, then there's a lot of that. But there's nuance around it. If you're seeking asylum, if you're trying to get your citizenship, those things matter. The point is they're trying to conflate this with just some people out there saying that no matter if they're illegal or not, nobody cares. Now, there are some of those fringe weirdos out there. Like, I think that's insane. That's like saying a law doesn't matter. But for him to frame it as that's the argument versus getting rid of illegals, it's just not the reality, guys. But Miller, Zionist himself, is hell-bent on turning this country inside out. And he says, 0 rules, 0 restrictions, no limits. Guys, that's just not true. Anyone can come, anyone overstay a visa. People are morally outraged. Well, guess what? Trump came out and said this. Our great farmers and people in hotel and leisure business have been stating that their very aggressive policy in immigration is taking very good long-time workers away from them, whose jobs being almost impossible to replace. In many cases, criminals allowed into our country by the very stupid Biden open board policies are applying for those jobs. This is not good. We must protect our farmers, but get the criminals out of here. Great. So work yourself into a pretzel to make sense of that one for me. The ones that they tell you are okay. Oh, got it. Except here's Miller with his no, black and white. They're legal, they go, which is what their whole push has been. And then Trump goes, except all the ones that we like and the ones that work for our businesses and the ones that are in farms and the ones in the hotels and the ones. Yeah, that's stupid. Here's what he actually said.
Look, today, I put out a statement today about farmers. Our farmers are being hurt badly by, they have very good workers. They've worked for them for 20 years. They're not citizens, but they've turned out to be, great. And
so they're illegally here. This is the point.
We're going to have to do something about that. We can't take farmers and take all their people and send them back because they don't have maybe what they're supposed to have, maybe not.
Oh, what was that? You mean they don't have citizenship? Is that what you meant to say? They don't have documentation? He's kind of weird. Oh, maybe not, maybe no, wishy-washy. Like, how blithe is that? To destroy people's lives who were actually here legally on a massive scale. And again, going back to the origins of people like Khalil and Ozturk, who actually green card, visa, who were completely on the up and up, had no criminal record, who were here legally, to destroy their lives because they said what Israel doesn't like. And for you to make this idea that, well, maybe they don't have it. Like, these are the Millers and Gnomes and Bondis who are like aggressive. They shouldn't be here. They get thrown away and we're going to send them to El Salvador because they're just illegally here. That was the line they drew. And now you're going, maybe not. Who cares? We'll figure it out. I just think it's insane. And this is bothering people. Like, look, there's a lot of Republicans that are like just completely confounded by this because they were of the mind that there's no air in this, that the illegals are bad and we have to stop it because that's what they pushed. They leaned into the most radical side of the conversation and now they're shifting. But as Tracy points out, that's what they tend to do. I just think this is insanely obvious.
And you know what's going to have to be, great? And we're going to have to do something about that. We can't take farmers and take all their people and send them back because they don't have maybe what they're supposed to have, maybe not. And you know what's going to happen and what is happening? They get rid of some of the people because, you go into a farm and you look and people they've been there for 20.
Like, just listen to the way he's doing this. You so obviously know that he is, like people, like the way he's doing it is trying to, he's bad at maneuvering what he knows is obviously contradicting what he said before. But you know that people that blindly support him, which is this entire inner circle, they will go along with whatever he said like it's absolute gospel and there was never a contradiction anywhere.
25 years and they've worked great and the owner of the farm loves them and everything else. And then you're supposed to throw them out. And you know what happens?
Yeah, by your orders, bud. That's what you have been doing. It's not some abstract thing going on. You have been the orchestrator of this whole thing. And now, because obviously people who have, billion dollar agriculture businesses that run on illegal immigrants, they said, hey, bud, I need that. Stop doing this. And he falls in line or whatever it is. Yeah, maybe it's his interest. Maybe it's people he knows. Maybe it's an Israeli, like this whole thing about China owning land. I guarantee you Israel owns all sorts of things in this country, more than businesses they operate through their intelligence in this country, like Carbine, like Comframe, like a number of them. The point is that is just egregiously hypocritical.
They end up hiring the criminals that have come in, the murderers from prisons.
Oh, we know that, do we? So you get rid of an illegal alien that they hired and the criminal steps into its place. Well, wouldn't they also be illegal? And couldn't you also remove them? Explain that logic to me. So you're going to go one round and be done forever and let the rest of them scoop in after them? I mean, guys, this is just so stupid. And anybody with a brain can work these things through. That's my point. It's very clumsy what's happening right here.
Everything else. So we're going to have an order on that pretty soon, I think. We can't do that to our farmers and leisure too, hotels.
Oh, yeah. In a secondary thought, hotels that I run, no big deal there.
We're going to have to use a lot of common sense on that.
Common sense. Yeah, clearly. Right. So as I think Jeffrey pointed out today, so if you're claiming that's common sense, then what you just admitted is everything you've done so far is not, because they're completely contradictory. At the very least, hypocritical, right? You're saying one thing, and then when it applies to your interest, it's suddenly something else, which might as well be the partisan definition. Now, again, Stephen Miller, I'll come back to that. I want to show that. Before we get to it, there's another clip. Has to do with Chinese immigrants, which I think is relevant. But Patrick says, Stephen, what did the president mean by this? Like clearly calling him out, right? Because he's up here going, no, thou shall not pass. No air in the conversation. And Trump goes, accept all them, and makes them look stupid. But they don't care. I mean, I think they do in the interest of Trump, for whatever reason, deviating from the plan, whatever Zionist infiltration is going on, called him out for it. Michael Tracy says, illegal immigration is such a catastrophic blight on society that those who knowingly employ illegal immigrants will be given special consideration to continue employing illegal immigrants. He does a great job sometimes of just encapsulating the stupidity of the whole thing. But, very partisan. Consider that. I don't blindly follow and trust anybody. I just think that's insane. That is the narrative they built this entire time. And then he makes a great point that they're the ones knowingly employing illegal aliens, and they're not a problem. It's like the whole Epstein client list thing on a much smaller degree, but you're just ignoring the real problem there because they're not really going after this problem, guys. And this says, backing amnesty for illegal immigrants after the influencer brigades just spent the past week in apocalyptic uproar over the innate evils of any and all illegal immigration is a point in favor of the hypothesis that the funniest possible outcome is usually the most likely one. Or that they just want chaos, and this is not about American anything. It's about somebody else bringing us to our knees. But, of course, Cernovich steps in. Some of these blind adherents to the team. This is funny. This is on June 12th. Saving America is not negotiable, says the White House account. And it says, Biden let 21 million unvetted illegal aliens flood into the country. Many of them rapists, murderers, terrorists, and all, just the same big. This is what they've been pushing the whole time. And make sense of this for me with what he just did. They have stolen American jobs. It's like, okay, there are criminals in any group. To claim somehow that that most of them, that's provably false, by the way. In fact, there's plenty of even U.S. data that shows you from both sides of the paradigm that the majority of these people don't, and far less percentage than average Americans. Now, my point is because obviously most of them they're just trying to keep away from getting deported. They're illegal. That's a crime. They should be. That's my opinion. The point, though, is that many of them are trying to fly under the radar, so they don't. You can look up the data for yourself. But it goes on to make this whole thing about, exactly what you'd expect. Those who are here legally should self-deport using the app, or we will remove you. Except until it's the ones you like. Or, your buddy calls you on the phone and says, Trump, you're hurting my business. So Cernovich says, the base spoke and Trump listened. God, this is the same day, by the way, that Trump made those statements. He says, unlike welfare queens, Tom Massey and Rand Paul, isn't it funny how the America First reality people, the ones that are actually fighting for those things, at least in most ways, are the ones that everyone turned on because Trump said so? As always, guys, it's not America First for this crowd. It's Trump first. And he says, who cry when voters speak their concerns? Who are you talking about? I mean, really? That just seems like baseless misinformation for the team you're on. And it says, now go cry more about paid influencers, your taxpayer-funded dollars, podcasters. Is he talking about his own team? I mean, that seems pretty interesting. The bottom line is, that's incredible. Promises made, promises kept, as you literally allow the opposite to happen. So Sean, this is Sean, not familiar, I guess I am following him. Farashi, who is this again? I'm not familiar. I don't remember. But the point is, he says, I'm confused. Legal immigration is fine. Illegal immigration is not fine. This feels amnesty-ish. Remember, that was the Biden point. Giving them amnesty, allowing Chinese immigrants to come in, whether students or not, allowing people who are on farms that you like being given broad amnesty. Remember what Trump said about that when Biden did that to people that they deported? He said, that's illegal. They don't care. See how hypocritical this is? Because Biden declared, and by the wave of his hand, we already talked about this, that all these people from Sudan, that they're all here legally because we're protecting them. Okay, you can disagree, but he did that. You step in and go wrong and put them in prisons, which is mostly what happened, or send them to terrible places in the world, and then do the same thing. It's cartoons, guys. It's embarrassing. As an American, I'm embarrassed by all this. This person, and then Patriot Voice says, because MAGA was snowed again. And he says, hey, MAGA, did you vote for mass amnesty of illegal immigrants as long as they are farmers and hotel workers? He says, this accounts for probably the largest percentage of illegals in our country. So much for mass deportations was Trump touted vigorously on the campaign trail. I mean, do we even need to go over all this? I'm of the mind that most people here already know this, but the sad thing is so many out there, they'd read this and wouldn't even care. Facts aren't what they're fighting for. Here's my point from earlier. A lot of these are major. This one's not that major, but a lot of these are large MAGA supporting accounts. They quote the same thing and simply say without equivocation, anyone that hires illegal should be fined, publicly humiliated, and flogged. I don't care who they voted for. This is a MAGA account. I'm just trying to make it clear to people out there, you're not alone. Stop trying to adhere to these screaming idiots at the top of this paradigm. Most people are aware we're deviating rapidly from even what you were promised. Here's another example. Destiny Resendez. She says, what the F? Can't wait to hear those within MAGA who've been screaming China is the problem, like Loomer, like a lot of them, Jones, in response to the criticism of this administration's foreign policy, right? She says, I voiced concerns over Trump's admin aligning with war criminal Bibi, Netanyahu, and many MAGA on the app tried to shut down that conversation, and most of them used the China threat to redirect the spotlight. Now what? If China is the big problem, why does Trump want 500,000 Chinese to go to school here and possibly stay? I'll play the clip for you. So much for borders. Just bring them in like Biden did? Guys, it's actually shockingly crazy. This is like, this. You know what? This is as crazy to me as 2 days into the administration deploying an mRNA platform and having that not just completely derail everything. It's the exact opposite of what's being promised. And I kind of think that's by design. But you guys can decide. All I want is people to see that and call it out. She says, what about COVID? You know what virus that started because our universities, Chapel Hill, working with the Chinese that led to millions of deaths and plummeted everyone closer to poverty? Now, she's well aware the U.S., as David Martin would tell you, is like the real culprit there, but China was involved. But, you know, the partisan narrative is China did it, right? But now it's okay to bring Chinese students in. How do you make sense of any of this? Now, it says it's okay. We'll just bring them in to do the science here on our soil. Now, arguably, I think it's a lot to do with AI and where the work base comes from. There's a lot of leading people in that field. I think that's what it's about. He says, we'll just bring them in to do the science. And why not let Charles Lieber lead this effort? See, she knows. It's just students, Destiny. That's what they'll tell her, right? People that ignore the facts. And if it was Democrats doing it, they'd scream foul. She says, yeah, what about those H-1B visas y'all were in fuss over? There are honest people out there that see this every day, not just this, but every time they're contradictory and call it out. Destiny's one of them. She says, bring them in. Just make sure they don't support Palestinians because they'll deport them. That's just well put. Now, here's the clip that should shock you if you're paying attention.
Always been in favor of students coming in from other countries.
Oh, he's always been in favor unless they call it Israel, right? Or unless they look different than you, or unless they, and on and on and on. You've always been in support. But that's just a literal rewriting of history.
That includes China.
No, it doesn't.
And we have 500,000 Chinese students coming in. I've always been
Wow.
in favor of it.
500,000.
Does it mean that you have to watch people? Yeah, you have to watch students, but you have to watch other people also. I've always been strong.
Such a meaningless statement. So basically nothing then. If it's everyone, then nothing or all, right? That's not what he wants you to take from that what you will. That yes, we'll monitor all of them, which they probably will. But then he goes to say, but we monitor everybody. So basically you just said nothing will change. It'll be the same for everybody. It's the way he does this, because one's meant for one group, the other's meant for the other. And one side will ignore one part of it, the other side will ignore the other. They take what they want from it. It's how this works.
Only in favor of it. I think it's a great thing. It's good for our schools. I think it's good for our country. I'm also in favor of having them stay. I've been in favor of letting them stay. If you get educated for 4 years, you're willing to get educated for...
Except unless you're Ozturk, unless you're Khalil, unless you're anybody out there that's protested in any way against Israel, which they've aggressively gone after. Hypocrites.
4 years. I like people being able to stay. They have some great students.
I mean, this is just a gross misrepresentation of what they've all been doing. Maybe it's because they know they're failing and they're trying to reset the narrative. It's just lazy. It's embarrassing. Now, Laura Loomer, China's cozy relationship with the Dominican Republic is worrisome. Just as I previously reported, China's trying to solidify relations with the Dominican Republic, and Biden holdovers at the State Department are helping them to undermine Trump's agenda. And then this happens. You know what I mean? Like, these people are clowns, guys. I'm not even saying I'm not even getting into the points about where in Dominican Republic and China. Sure, that's not even the point. My point is about the overlap of Trump and the agenda here, and how these people with their hair on fire will point at anything other than the Israeli infiltration that's literally happening every moment. And here's another point on the 10th. I'm really excited that we are rallying Americans to be anti-China. We need more anti-CCP energy in our country. It's about time that we wake people up to the fact that the CCP is our enemy, and then Trump lets in 500,000. You know what I mean? Like, it just is so contradictory in every possible way. Mel says, wow, the hits just keep coming today. Trump said yesterday the trade deal with China was done in exchange for rare earth minerals, which how long have I been telling you that was playing a factor? We would grant Chinese students access to our college and universities. Now, to be clear, rare earth minerals in China is a very public conversation. My point was that this was going to be needed. This claim that they were mining everything we needed here, all the lies, they were always going to need China in regard to where this goes with AI. And here we are. So that's what it looks like to actually be correct on something and not waver with every other point until it finally comes that one of them come to pass. But it says the part he left out is that he's doubling the number of visas China is already getting. So screw the hourly workers and who have to compete with illegal labor and blue collar and market, and screw our kids who now have to compete with an extra 230,000 Chinese students who'll be filling up our college in the year. Yeah, all the same things that the Republicans were just saying. But it's okay because Trump's okay with this one, right? Well, to finish in general, Palantir, you can't decouple this from the larger conversation. So all of this, everything today we talked about, is in one way rationalizing this conversation. And she says, remember that the time that Trump shills, remember that time that Trump shills said that Palantir needed access to the IRS, Social Security Administration records so they could help find the illegals, right? And then like a week later, Trump said he was going to grant amnesty to all those working illegals. Remember that? Do you understand, she says, now why we freaked out so much? It was never about tracking illegal immigrants. It was always about hunting political dissidents. Now, look, that's her opinion, but I agree. I think that's exactly the case. Man in America broke this down. Just interviewed Derek, by the way, and says, everyone's watching the riots in LA, but no one's asking why now. Why now? They unleash chaos and then offer the solution. Palantir-powered AI, facial recognition, biometric tracking. ICE just signed a $30 million contract. The groundwork is being laid right now. And the most vocal supporters? Conservatives. The same people who once warned about Big Brother are now begging for digital ID, deportation squads, and the use of the military, and AI surveillance, so long as it's used on illegals. But the tech doesn't care who it's voted for it. Once built, it'll be used on everyone. This isn't about safety, it's about control. You're not watching riots. You're watching the birth of a technocratic police state, and half the country is applauding it. Well said. By the way, I was mentioning this with Shannon. This is somebody who I reached out a while back because he was talking about something around the election that I appreciated. I reached out and said, hey, let's connect. And apparently he apparently got right back to me. And I check my DMs I try to these days as often as I can. I didn't see it until a couple days ago when I reached out about this. And instead of looking on my DMs, I just searched for his name. And what do you know? He got right back. I said, yeah, let's connect. I'm telling you guys, there's suppression tactics on these things to stop people from collaborating. It's my opinion, but I think it's the case. And I've reached out again, but maybe you won't see it, but hopefully we can connect. But I'll include this as well. Now, just to be clear, this is not the same as the immigration OS. We already talked about all that. This is as of June 10th. It says ICE advances sole source deal with Palantir for new surveillance backbone, just like many of us warned. Now realize the immigration OS and the infiltration of all the U.S. data was one part of this, but this is just ICE advancing their sole source deal with Palantir. It is another step with this. They're building out this state that we've been telling you about. People are cheering it on. I'll include our discussion on April 21st called the Great Palantir Reset, seeing where this was going. I'll include our conversation with the IMA about the Palantir AI Panopticon. And on the way out, guys, I'll leave you with another great clip from Greg Reese about AI controlling the military. As he goes through this, consider the point of AI also controlling the government, if not being government. Right? That's something that I really see as part of this, if not already happening. But I will leave you with this because I think this is where our mind should be. This is something that they really don't want people focusing on. And that's why you've got the screamers out there directing you in any other direction other than what's happening right around you. So thank you for tuning in today, guys. I appreciate all the support. If you want to continue to support TLAV, we do this for free. All right? We put this stuff out because we believe in it. And I'll continue to do so, regardless of whether anyone supports it, because I believe in it. But if you would like to see this grow and get back to where we were, please find ways to support us, even if it's just a letter of support. Thank you for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
In the military, a kill chain refers to the sequential process of finding, fixing, tracking, targeting, engaging, and assessing a target. And the U.S. military war machine has found that humans are not as willing to kill as much as they'd like them to be. After World War II, studies conducted by Brigadier General S.L.A. Marshall showed that only 20% of U.S. infantrymen fired their weapons at the enemy, even when under direct threat. He attributed this to an innate human resistance to killing. He wrote in his book, Men Against Fire, that the average and healthy individual has such an inner and usually unrealized resistance towards killing a fellow man that, at the vital point, he becomes a conscientious objector. This led to changes in U.S. military training, such as human-shaped silhouette targets and dehumanization of the enemy. In 1996, the psychological cost of learning to kill in war and society by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman showed that increasing the kill rate in U.S. infantrymen came with psychological costs due to the guilt and trauma of killing. The National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent Health in 2011 showed that soldiers who believed they killed someone in combat were at higher risk of PTSD, depression, and suicidal thoughts. It is for these reasons that the IDF, with the help of the U.S. military and Palantir, have been utilizing artificial intelligence on the battlefield. Destroying an entire building to kill one person may seem extreme for a human, but not for AI. It is admitted that the AI targeting system murders innocent civilians 10% of the time, and AI is not bothered one bit. The Golden Dome that President Trump announced will rely upon AI-driven tracking and interceptors, and lethal autonomous weapons are next. The Bullfrog M2 is an autonomous 50 caliber machine gun developed for the U.S. military. It detects, tracks, identifies, and acquires targets autonomously. Last year, DARPA released footage of artificial intelligence autonomously flying an F-16, the X-62A, against a human-piloted F-16. Known as the founder of Oculus VR, Palmer Luckey is the latest harmless-looking frontman for the military-industrial complex. In 2017, Luckey founded Anduril Industries, a military technology company focused on autonomous military weapons systems.
To be clear, autonomy does not mean remote controlled. Once an autonomous weapon is programmed and given a task, it can use artificial intelligence for surveillance or to identify, select, and engage targets. No operator needed.
It's a scary idea to some people.
It's a scary idea, but I mean, that's the world we live in. I'd say it's a lot scarier, for example, to imagine a weapon system that doesn't have any level of intelligence at all.
In your mind, is it enough just to have all these things as deterrents? Or do they have to be deployed and used?
They have to believe that you can use them.
By the end of this year, Andrew says it will have secured more than $6 billion in government contracts worldwide.
The U.S. Department of Defense has the goal of always having robots, not soldiers, make first contact with the enemy. Robotic systems are being developed to perform everything from surveillance to killing. With an army of autonomous slaughter bots, there is no longer a concern of ethics. If a government wanted to unleash them against their own people, they will have no problem following those orders. Greg Reese reporting.